Chapter 61. The Mannerheim Line welcomes you III. Many a time, one's plans could never catch to the constant changes life would throw at them. Zhang Heng had to wait for the gunshots to stop before returning to where the first gunshot was fired. Doing that lowered his risk of getting killed significantly. Unfortunately, something unexpected happened. The first batch of Soviet conscripts had returned, a lot earlier than he initially expected. It was pointless to complain and wallow in regret right now, and all he could do was to crouch as low as possible and run for his life. There was no time to wait. He bolted. At the sign of the slightest movement, the soldiers quickly spotted him. It was in times like these that one had to appreciate the perks of the Soviet army, considering they had all been given bright khaki uniforms, hence standing out like golden scarecrows on the snow-covered land. Having large targets painted on their bodies by default, it was hard for enemies not to notice them. Hence, the fatality rate of the Soviets was alarmingly high. With his back turned, Zhang Heng somehow knew that the troops had their guns loaded. Luckily, the rigorous marathon training finally paid off, where he managed to keep a good distance between him and the soldiers while he ran. There were also tall trees all around him. Though he could hear guns being fired at him, the shots missed him, mostly going astray and landing far away. Still, Zhang Heng would not dare to let his guard down. He kept running until his stamina was almost depleted. Having to lean on a tree to catch some breath, he knew that by now he should be safe. The soldiers wouldn't have any stamina left after the long fights they had been through before this. If they wanted to see another day before dying of fatigue, they would be smart not to pursue him for this period. Immediately, Zhang Heng took the opportunity to check out the canvas backpack that he just acquired. There were personal hygiene items, a spare foot wrap, utensils, and a few packs of MRE. Foot wraps were unique to the Soviet army, regularly used to keep the soldier warm and reduce friction on the feet. As for the MRE, it seemed like their staple was black bread. Thankfully for him, dehydrated sausage and a packet of red tea came inserted as well. He then came across 2 cans of beef and a lighter, a delightful discovery as these items were a rarity in the USSR. Their industry infamously prowess lagged far behind other more developed nations. When Zhang Heng thought of the 2 dead bodies that he saw earlier, he remembered that they both wore different attire. One of the dead Soviets lacked the distinct 5 red stars on his sleeve, which could mean this canvas backpack should have belonged to an officer. Unfortunately, bullets discriminated against no soul on the battlefield. Even more so, the high-ranking officers, usually becoming the primary target of enemies. There were at least 3 to 4 bullet holes riddling the officer's face. It seemed that someone wanted to make damn sure that he was truly dead. As Zhang Heng frisked him, he tried his best not to stare directly at the officer's bloody face. Despite his close brush with death, he was rather pleased with his yield today. At least, he could now protect himself from the brutal cold of the Siberian tundra and keep his stomach filled. His attention soon turned to the pistol in his hand. China's notoriously draconian gun control laws had enabled only a few from elite professions to set their hands on a real firearm. Most of the regular public only got their ideas of guns from the movies. Zhang Heng was no exception, having no idea what model of gun he was holding. All he knew was this gun was a revolver, and there were 7 chambers in a revolving barrel. It had been shot 2 times, still containing 5 bullets. It was at that time that Zhang Heng realized that he left too quickly earlier. He had taken the gun but had wholly forgotten the extra ammo. However, having 5 bullets was definitely better than none. The movies clearly showed the actors pulling triggers and coolly reloading their rounds, but never once their inner workings. Of course, the real deal here was way more complicated than a prop pea shooter. After fumbling with it for a while, he still could not figure out how to remove the 2 spent shells from the chamber. He had to put it away for now. After taking in a few sips of water, his stamina recovered, and he was refreshed. Having regained some strength, he quickly left the place, worried that the spirits of the dead soldiers would come back to haunt him. He continued walking into the deeper parts of the forest, only stopping after the sky had turned dark. At the very least, he knew that he was no longer in danger. Vision at night was a challenge. It was almost impossible to make anything out clearly. Since the forest was unfamiliar to the Soviets, it was almost certain now that they wouldn't continue their pursuit of him. Besides, they risked getting ambushed by Finnish guerrillas who had overrun the surrounding borders. With his mind put at ease, Zhang Heng finally stopped moving forward and decided that it was time to fix his hunger. He opened up his backpack, and out came the black bread. Having its origins in Germany, the recipe was then spread on to Eastern Europe and subsequently to Russia. For name's sake only, the bread itself was actually not black, its color caused by the overbaking process unique to it. Never underestimate the prowess of such basic food. During the height of the Second World War, German and Soviet troops primarily relied on it for survival. According to war records, this humble meal saved at least 4 million people from starvation in the USSR and had kept the war going for at least 10 million German troops. As for its taste, it had a unique touch to it. Zhang Heng used his knife to cut a slice, trying it out. Immediately, a light saltiness with a tinge of sour hit his tongue. It came with a rough texture, much like burnt toast, making it really hard for Zhang Heng to swallow. Thankfully, Zhang Heng had experienced extreme hunger before while he was venturing on the lone island. With war taken out of the equation, his current circumstance was actually a lot better than last time. Only one thing troubled him, though. He was unable to build a campfire to warm himself up. Not that he did not know how to do it, for even without the lighter in his backpack, he had the capability of building a campfire with only the things around him. His concern mainly focused on attracting any enemies, knowing that the fire would burn far and bright into the dark of night. Unfamiliar with his surroundings, he knew nothing of where the Soviet and Finnish troops were placed and wanted to take no chances. Zhang Heng had no idea where his enemies might come from. He also didn't know where the skirmishes constantly broke out between those troops, only hanging on the hope that he wouldn't end up in the crossfire. It was at that moment that he realized how cruel reality could be. Struggling to stay alive, all alone in the forest and in a time of war, was no easy feat. Luckily, he still had his trump card, and that was his shadow moment. Turning into shadow form for 3 minutes could save his life during a life-threatening moment. Unfortunately, he could only use it 2 times, which was why he was sparing in its usage. Unable to bear the cold, he attempted to look for a spot that could shield him from the freezing winds. Covered by the military jacket, he tried to sleep. Throughout the entire night, he was rudely awakened by the chill at least 3 times. The winter of 1939 in Finland was brutal, ranked among the top 10 harshest winters the entire human history had seen. Without fire, saying that it would be a challenge to stay alive was an understatement. If it were not for the Soviet goatskin military jacket, Zhang Heng knew that the extreme blizzard would eventually freeze him to death. After a long, frigid night, Zhang Heng finally saw the sun rising. With his frostbitten hands trembling, he picked a few twigs and used the lighter, fumbling around a few times before he got a flame. His hands were stiff and unresponsive. He had left half a kettle of water in front of him before he slept. Now, the water was completely frozen. Zhang Heng had no choice but to place the kettle as close as possible, the fire to melt the ice. In the meantime, he took the sausage from his backpack and roasted it over the flames. 10 minutes later, everything that he set out to do had been done. He then stood up and used the ice around him to extinguish the flames, making sure to stub out all the cinders. Putting a fire out in these places was surely more straightforward than starting it up. At the same time, he ate the sausage that was just ready. It didn't taste as bad as he initially expected, probably because he paired it with the black bread. Who knew what it was made of? One thing for sure, it was meat but wasn't pork, beef, or lamb. Still, it was edible. As he ate, Zhang Heng wasted no time and planned his next move, though. After long and hard deliberation, he was still unable to come up with anything to make his current circumstance better. Chapter 62. The Mannerheim Line welcomes you IV. Breakfast? That was it. Putting on the backpack, Zhang Heng randomly chose a direction and headed towards it. From where he lived, numerous war enthusiasts were extremely knowledgeable about World War II. They had an in-depth understanding of various war and deployment tactics and regularly debated the multiple strategies of famed generals. As for Zhang Heng, he had zero knowledge about warfare. Unless the spirit of Carl Gustav Emil Mannerheim or Clement Voroshilov himself possessed him, there wasn't much he could do to improve his current predicament. "There are eventually no heroes in war," said an inconvenient truth. Whether it was a person who achieved great feats or a soldier with masterful shooting skills, a stray could take away their lives within a matter of seconds. To increase his chances of survival, Zhang Heng set a principle for himself, and that was to stay as far away as possible from any crossfire. Places like Viborg, Summa Village, and Kale were a no-no, and he had to refrain from going there. As for the replica Uvrich Skonenberg Mannerheim, that would be the last place on Earth that Zhang Heng would go. His biggest problem was that he didn't know where the hell he was right now. Though he wanted to make sure to stay far away from the heat of battle, he had no idea where the safe zone was either. After traveling on foot for about half a day, Zhang Heng came across a platoon of Soviet soldiers. Thankfully, he spotted them first and quickly went into hiding. It seemed like the soldiers were in a rush, huffing their way while dragging a couple of cannons behind them. Amid the confusion, none of them realized Zhang Heng's presence, although he was right under their noses. It was so close a call, a deep chill ran up his spine. The trees in the forest were the perfect spot to conceal himself from the enemy. Protection, on the one hand, the trees also blocked him from seeing what was in front of him. Being in a situation out of his control made him extremely uncomfortable. After all, no one in this world was always lucky. It would be impossible that Zhang Heng would spot his enemies first before they spotted him every single time. In all honesty, he was on the disadvantageous side during this quest. There were few skills he possessed that could help him to survive in the wild. Playing the piano, modifying cars, and racing was basically useless in these circumstances. As for his level 2 archery skills, it turned out to be more practical than the gun that he was holding right now. Sadly, though, he had still not found the right bark to carve out his bowstring. Besides, using cold, passive weapons against hot firearms was definitely a bad idea. After experiencing the frosty winter in Finland, Zhang Heng started to doubt if he might even wake from his sleep the next time. It had only been 3 days since his arrival, with a grueling 137 days to go. Zhang Heng felt despair sinking in, and it hit him hard. He knew that he wouldn't survive much longer if he kept this up. He could choose to side with Finland's troops or the Soviet Union's troops, but he had no idea what they would do to him. In the end, Zhang Heng still could not make up his mind. Until the morning of the 4th day, Zhang Heng heard gunshots once again. And this time, the thunderous sound of cannons resounded in the forest as well. Sensing imminent danger, Zhang Heng decided that he would head in a different direction. It seemed as if he had used up the last bits of his luck this time. After paying so much attention to the sound of gunfire, he completely forgot to notice what was in front of him. This time, he encountered a scout team. There were only 11 well-equipped soldiers in the group and should be returning to the base since they heard the gunfire. The encounter with Zhang Heng was totally a coincidence to them. Clearly, nobody expected this to happen. Unfortunately, Zhang Heng did not have his shadow moment at hand, as he wanted to avoid triggering it while he traveled. He also did not expect to encounter enemies from such a close distance. He initially thought he would have a little time to search for the statue that was located in the pocket of his coat. The scout team stood by with their guns loaded. If they wanted to, they could open fire at Zhang Heng any time now. In the end, Zhang Heng owed his life to the military coat. Obviously, they would never shoot somebody wearing their own colors. However, they soon realized that Zhang Heng's attire was way different as compared to what they were wearing. They also noticed that he was of Asian descent. The soldier that stood in front was swinging his machine gun as he shouted at the same time. Unfortunately, Zhang Heng was not familiar with Russian, thus unable to understand what they were talking about. For now, he had to give up the idea of getting Shadow Moment out of his pocket. Left with no other options, Zhang Heng was forced to put both hands up. Seemingly, his continued silence had annoyed the soldier. The Soviet soldiers looked more and more ferocious by the second as he repeated the same words to Zhang Heng with his finger placed on the trigger, each time with greater intensity. This was probably the most perilous moment Zhang Heng had ever encountered. In a situation like this, He didn't know what he could do anymore. This was war. Killing and being killed were extremely common in an era like this. With every passing second, multitudes of civilians, enemies, and even allies died on the battlefield. The war had put everyone on edge most of the time, and no one would have qualms killing an unknown foreigner. Even Zhang Heng himself expected that the soldier would surely pull the trigger on him. Suddenly, the soldier that was pointing his gun fell to the ground with a loud thud. A bullet that came from nowhere penetrated his cranium. Blood splattered everywhere, his ferocious looks now plastered on his face forever. Sniper! Immediately, the scout team realized they were being ambushed by the Finnish guerrillas. In a panic, they ignored Zhang Heng, pointed their machine guns at the direction the bullet came from, and shouted frantically to take cover. This one soldier put his life on the line to pick up a machine gun on the road. Unfortunately, the shell traveled faster than him. The moment his hands landed on the machine gun, he too was shot dead. He collapsed and joined his dead ally. The second shot allowed the others to have a more unobstructed view of where the bullet came from. Without thinking twice, they started opening fire with full force at the sniper. Zhang Heng wasted no time and took the opportunity to run to a fallen tree that had been struck by lightning. The sniper who had hidden in the dark managed to kill another 2 soldiers that failed to look for a safe spot to hide. After that, the gunshots abruptly stopped. Was the sniper hit? The Soviets were extraordinarily jumpy and nervous, pulling the trigger and firing another barrage of bullets into the dark. Half a minute later, someone cautiously lifted his head to check his surroundings. There were no more gunshots. The remaining soldiers arched backward, bearing the weight of their machine guns while slowly approaching the sniper's location. At the same time, 2 soldiers walked towards Zhang Heng. Zhang Heng was already holding his shadow moment in his hand. Chapter 63. The Mannerheim Line welcomes UV. Zhang Heng readied himself to enter his shadow moment form. Then, as luck would have it, something unexpected happened again. The deafening bang of the sniper rifle firing could be heard loud and clear. The first soldier that walked towards sniper was hit, subsequently dropping to the ground, dead. Seconds later, the second soldier was also greeted with the same fate. Immediately, the remaining 5 soldiers lay on the ground and started blindly shooting in all directions. The 2 soldiers who had walked towards Zhang Heng quickly turned around and joined their allies in support. Unfortunately, their retaliation did not stop death from harvesting their lives. The sniper hiding in the dark had already switched his nest. In other words, the Soviets were shooting at a ghost. Subsequently, another 3 soldiers were hit. The remaining 2 soldiers could not handle the pressure of suspense any longer, throwing their weapons to the ground and ran into the forest for their lives while the sniper was reloading his gun. One of them ran for a bit when a deafening gunshot rang through the air. Apparently, 150 meters was not nearly enough to save his life from a long-range rifle. The soldier slipped on his tracks and fell down, very dead indeed. Blood gushed from the back of his head, painting the white snow around him in an ominous pool of red. In about 4 minutes, a total of 11 Soviet soldiers were killed mercilessly in this cold, alien land. The sniper that hid in the dark did not even waste a single bullet. For the shooter, it was all about the one-shot, one-skill thing. Immediately, Zhang Fan poured out everything from his backpack and picked up a tree branch beside him. He attempted to raise the twig with the bag to signal the sniper that he was willing to surrender. Just as he was about to wave the white flag, the backpack was hit by the bullet. This was a clear sign that the sniper had no intention to let anyone leave the forest alive. Zhang Heng presumed the coat he had put on caused the sniper to mistake him for a Soviet soldier. Unfortunately, Zhang Heng did not speak their language, making it impossible to explain himself. It became evident that the sniper didn't shoot the Soviets to save him. As the soldiers were focused on Zhang Heng, it made them easy targets for the sniper. This particular sniper was brazenly confident and scary at the same time. From the way he eliminated his enemies, he had made sure to first kill the soldier that posed the biggest threat. After that, he shot the one attempting to pick up the machine gun on the ground. His success in the killings had managed to instill great fear in the remaining soldiers, confusing them and lowering morale. After that, all he needed to do was to change his shooting spot and kill the rest of the Soviets. Though the remaining 2 soldiers had lost their will to fight, the sniper was no less determined that he was going to kill each and every enemy that appeared through his scope. Instead of choosing the nearest target, he chose to kill the target furthest away from him. Then, it was all textbook, as the shooter just needed to tackle the poor sod that was running at the back. As for Zhang Heng, the sniper decided that he posed no threat. Hence, he had decided to kill him last. While he was shooting down his enemies, he had presented with deadly accuracy his accomplished shooting skills and how he stayed calm while being meticulous all at once. It was at that moment that Zhang Heng realized his situation was no better than before. He was still being pushed to the edge of a cliff. The only thing that had changed was the enemy. It changed not for the better but from the Soviet soldiers to Finnish guerrilla fighters. The 11 dead bodies on the ground had proven that Finland was way better at their craft than good all Soviet Union. The longer he waited, the more dangerous the situation would become. It became apparent that the sniper was extremely familiar with this forest. That would mean he could walk up and shoot Zhang Heng right behind him before he realized it. Hence, Zhang Heng made a quick resolve to do something about it. He held the wooden statue in one hand and held the revolver in the other. In his mind's eye, he was thinking about the crow. Seconds later, the crow in the dark slowly opened its eyes, and Zhang Heng stared right into them. He could feel his soul gradually being absorbed into an endless dark vortex, free-falling in a black void that was formless. The magical part about it was his body getting lighter, almost like a feather floating in the wind. When he landed, he opened his eyes, and he saw the white birch and snow above him. Though he had experienced all of this before, he would never get used to this strange, out-of-body experience. He became disorientated and unhinged as he entered shadow moment form. Zhang Heng's body was now completely disappeared. All that was left was his shadow on the ground. In this form, he would not be able to use his senses, neither would he be able to talk or listen to sounds around him. His vision was limited to a patch of sky above him. He had, however, discovered a solution to overcome this problem. All he needed to do was attach his shadow to a tree, and he would be able to scan his surroundings. His speed was greatly reduced when he entered shadow form, but he felt more energetic than ever. Fatigue was a thing of the past. The good thing here was that he did not need to worry about the barrier that blocked his way. With all things considered, his movement speed was not bad at all. He took 50 seconds to travel to the location where the last gunshot came from, and used another 20 seconds to look for the shooting point. The ground had a slight elevation to it and had 2 giant rocks to protect the sniper. Clear marks on the ground signified that someone lay there only a moment ago. Clearly, the sniper had abandoned the hideout and shifted to another location. This time, a series of footprints marked the ground. Zhang Heng was now the hunter instead of the hunted. Half a minute went by, and Zhang Heng saw a being shuffling slowly on the snow-covered ground. It was near impossible to spot it if one did not pay attention. The sniper was wearing a white ghillie suit with a mask on him. His entire body was fully covered except for his eyes, a perfect blend with the whited-out forest. One of his hands clutched the sniper, and another held a snowboard. It was just as Zhang Heng had guessed. The sniper was planning to sneak him up and kill him from behind. He would never have guessed that his target was the one actually standing right behind him. All these guerrilla techniques had given the Soviets an endless nightmare, continually messing around with the worn-out Slavs. They relied heavily on their effective camouflage and the knowledge of the area to choose a perfect spot to take out their enemies. This time, their expertise was about to be challenged by Zhang Heng. In shadow form, Zhang Heng could tail the sniper without making any noise. Long, overbearing shadows of the huge trees around him also added an extra layer of cover. Zhang Heng lifted up the revolver and aimed at the sniper's head. There were only 10 seconds left before the shadow form expired. Once the time was up, he would be able to pull the trigger and kill the sniper. As this was his first time killing a person, he naturally hesitated for a bit. Unfortunately, there was no other way around it if he wanted to live to see another day. The sniper's shooting prowess and innate knowledge of the terrain would make it impossible for Zhang Heng to get away even if he had a 3-minute head start. Chapter 64. The Mannerheim Line welcomes you VI. Zhang Heng and the sniper were patient, both adamant at waiting for the other to first make his move. Of course, the sniper, which lay on the ground waiting for his victim to pop his head, was definitely a cut above Zhang Heng. He had read before that most of the guerrillas in Finland were once hunter-gatherers. They knew these grounds they stepped on with their very souls, spending their entire childhood in a forest like this to hunt down small animals. Even though their targets had since changed from animals to humans, it was no doubt that the same method still applied. This made them very, very good at what they did. Unfortunately, this was no fair game. When the crow appeared in the dark again, everything would come to an end. Zhang Heng had his finger placed steadily on the trigger as he prepared himself mentally to vanquish the target in front of him. Suddenly, the sniper rolled to his side. Zhang Heng was taken aback in a jump scare, knowing there was no noise from his surroundings. Finish. His worst fears had come to pass. Alas, his shadow form had been found out by the sniper. It was then that he saw the bullet landing on the snow-caked ground. With his lightning-fast reflexes, the sniper managed to dodge the first round of attack. Immediately, he pointed his weapon in a different direction and pulled the trigger. Zhang Heng then realized another weakness of the shadow form. The sunlight shining from a particular side would mean Zhang Heng's shadow was also fixed in a certain direction. Though he could attach his shadow on a tree to observe his surroundings, he could only look to the right, left, and front. There was, however, no way that he could look at his back. Even if he turned around, he would only see the tree bark. The only thing he knew right now was that the deafening gunshot would have undoubtedly drawn the attention of Soviet soldiers nearby. However, he had no idea what their strength was and how far they were. The thing that troubled him the most was that his shadow form was about to expire. He had around 10 seconds left before he would be ultimately revealed. Right now, Zhang Heng wasn't bothered to kill the sniper anymore. The only thing on his mind was making sure that he wouldn't be caught between the impending exchange of fire. Without wasting any time, he swiftly left the trees and bolted away from the sniper as fast as possible. Then, he attached his shadow to another tree. Zhang Heng wished that he could run further away from the sniper, but his time was running out. He knew for a fact that if the Soviets won the fight, he would still be spared the chance to get away safely. However, if the sniper won the fight, this would be the last day he breathed on this earth. Rather than be killed like helpless prey, Zhang Heng resolved that he would fight for his life. The place that he chose to hide was only a meter away from the sniper. At such close proximity, it would be hard for the sharpshooter to kill effectively. Besides, there was a high chance that Zhang Heng would not miss his target when shooting at point blank, even though he was still new to guns. In about 4 seconds, he would reappear again. Nevertheless, the battle on the other side heated up pretty fast. A hailstorm of bullets landed on the tree that Zhang Heng was attached to, and he clearly saw shards of wood flying all over. Clearly, the soldiers that had just arrived were more ferocious than the scout team, which seemed docile at this point. Having seen what the sniper was capable of doing, Zhang Heng believed that he wouldn't allow the soldiers shooting so wildly at him to live too long. Judging by the sound of continuous gunfire from the machine gun, the number of soldiers that came to kill the sniper was hell lot more than he expected. Once the soldiers on the front line were killed by the sniper, they would simply send another batch of conscripts to attack him. However, it seemed like the sniper had found a perfect nest to return fire. He waited for a short while before firing. The miraculous part about all of it was that he was about to kill an enemy each time he fired his gun. In the meantime, Zhang Heng had to control his breathing, not making a single move to avoid being detected. After a round of violent shooting, the Soviet side seemed weakened. The constant staccato of guns firing reduced to intermittent bursts. In contrast, the sniper still had the upper hand. From the start to the end, he was like a killing machine, mauling every living being in front of him without any mercy. Suddenly, the killing machine fell silent. Zhang Heng knew that he was running out of bullets. This sniper had just been through 2 fierce battles and had probably been assigned a different target before he got here. Logically, he should be running out of ammunition by now. This had complicated the whole situation. Of course, he had never hoped for such a terrifying sniper to roam the forests, looking for someone to kill. Initially, he thought that there were only 2 outcomes from this standoff. If the sniper was killed by the Soviets, he would run as fast as possible to get away from them. If the sniper managed to kill all those soldiers, then he would sneak behind the sniper and pull the trigger on him. The only outcome that he did not think of was the depletion of ammunition. Since the sniper had run out of bullets, the soldiers would know this and attempt to approach the sniper. The place that Zhang Heng was hiding at was really close to the sniper. When they shot at each other, they would definitely not notice his presence. However, once the fight was over, either the soldiers or the sniper would definitely see something escaping. The sniper leaned on a large rock. He must have realized how improbable it would be to get out of this alive. He took out the dagger strapped to his waist and prepared to fight for his life. Suddenly, a stone rolled by his feet. In an instant, he spotted a Soviet soldier creeping up from behind the tree, prompting the sniper to pick up his weapon unconsciously. To his surprise, the soldier signaled him to stay quiet. Half a minute ago, Zhang Heng assumed that this could be a golden opportunity for him to save himself. After spending 4 days all alone in the forest, he quickly realized it would be impossible for him to live here for hundreds of days. Be it the Finnish or the Soviets, Zhang Heng had no quarrel with them, really. Based on experience, these people would never give him the chance to explain himself. They would usually point their guns at him before he could say anything. And the worst part was, Zhang Heng did not know how to speak their language. Now that the sniper had run out of ammunition, Zhang Heng felt that this was the perfect moment to make a move. He first pointed at the red stars on his coat, then at himself, then waved his hands. He was trying to tell the sniper that he had nothing to do with the Soviets. Unfortunately, the gestures did not prompt a response from the sniper. Zhang Heng then took off the coat to show him his black turtleneck and jeans. In the end, the sniper's attention was caught by the revolver that Zhang Heng had with him. Zhang Heng knew that there was no time for this kind of back and forth with the shooter. He could hear that the boots of the Soviets approaching them. Clearly, there was more than one of them. He couldn't possibly deal with them alone. In a critical moment such as this, a leap of faith was a necessity. Once again, Zhang Heng clutched the wooden statue in his hand to prepare for any unforeseen circumstances. He then drew the revolver and tossed it to the sniper. This time, the shooter actually responded by picking the weapon. He pointed at Zhang Heng aggressively, threatening to let out a shot. After a second, he lowered the pistol. Zhang Heng let out a massive sigh of relief. It seemed that his leap of faith had finally borne fruit. He removed his phone from his pocket. For the past few days, he had tried his best to conserve battery, only using it sparingly to get his bearings. Otherwise, he would turn it off. Right now, it was the best time for him to use it to distract his enemies. He set a quick alarm and tossed it far away from him. Like a grenade, 3 seconds later, the cell phone blared on the snowy ground, instantly drawing the soldiers' attention. The sniper then popped half of his head out, aiming for the Soviets. The first shot was a blank. Zhang Heng had to prioritize his own safety. He had to consider the possibility of the sniper killing him when he gave him his gun. That was why he swapped the first bullet with a blank. Not about to take any more chances, he would instantly change into shadow form if the sniper did pull the trigger on him. Shocked by the blank shot, he immediately fired the second shot, bursting a soldier's head open with a splatter of bright blood. Chapter 65. The Mannerheim line welcomes you VII. Zhang Heng had done everything that could be done, knowing he won't be much help in the battle. So, he squatted behind a tree and waited for it to be all over. The skirmish ended faster than expected. Once the skilled sniper had a gun in his hand, he killed 3 Soviet soldiers within a swift 40 seconds. Once the barrage of gunshots were over, Zhang Heng stealthily emerged from his hiding spot. The sniper still clutched the revolver in his hand tightly, albeit seemingly a little more relaxed now as he did not aim the gun at Zhang Heng. When Zhang Heng walked towards the sniper, he noticed that there was blood on his shirt. It was apparent now that in the heat of the shootout, he didn't manage to dodge all the bullets. Zhang Heng came to realize that indeed, it was not easy for him to meet someone without hostile intentions. He had to figure out a way to bring him back to his base, no matter what. All his effort would have gone to waste if he let him die here. Zhang Heng picked up his cell phone and turned off the alarm, noticing a sea of empty shells strewn all over the ground. Remarkably, and thankfully so, his cell phone was perfectly fine. He then proceeded to collect the backpacks of the dead soldiers. As his current supplies were almost depleted, he had to stock up well to stay alive in this inhospitable land. He had his eyes fixed on the sniper, who nodded his head at him. He was staring at the bullet case that was strapped to the dead soldier's waist. Immediately, Zhang Heng grabbed 2 magazines and passed it to him. Without a second thought, he reloaded his machine gun. Putting pressure on his wound with one hand, he mustered all his strength to stand up with the other. 2 fierce battles had just taken place here, and the sound of continuous gunshots had probably attracted more enemies. They had to leave this place as soon as possible, or this time, they would surely die. Zhang Heng picked a backpack and brought it with him. He, too, didn't let up on the chance to pick up a machine gun. Seeing that the sniper was having a hard time walking, Zhang Heng instinctively walked over in an attempt to assist him. However, it seemed like he wanted no help, shaking his head and pushing away Zhang Heng's hand. Zhang Heng was displeased by the response, knowing well enough it wasn't the best time to play Rambo. Zhang Heng needed him to point him in the right direction if they wanted to survive this forest. Also, without Zhang Heng's help, it would be tough for the severely wounded sniper to walk out of the woods alive. Both of them were in a tight spot now and had no choice but to rely on each other to get through this. After a while, the sniper started to understand Zhang Heng's intention. This time, he allowed Zhang Heng to prop him up. With an arm supporting his body, they both took the slow walk towards the direction that the sniper pointed to. On the way, Zhang Heng saw countless bodies of Soviet troops. An armored personnel carrier lay in pieces beside the road, still burning with fury. There were also bodies of a few Finnish guerrillas with their winter camouflage thrown all over on the ground as well. One could only see how much hatred the Soviets must have harbored toward the Finnish guerrillas. Zhang Heng needed a change of coat, but sadly, most of the ones on the bodies were riddled with bullet holes. Some even had powder burns on them, leaving huge, smoldering holes. Anybody passing them now would have found it extremely peculiar to see a duo made up of an Asian and a Finnish. To make matters worse, they looked completely out of place, like they didn't belong to his forest. For the forthcoming days, they would constantly see dead bodies on the ground and incessant gunfire from afar. This time the gunfire did not last long. Again, it didn't look too safe anymore. The gunfire could have been a signal for the Soviets to help their allies. Then, in turn, the Finnish guerrilla snipers would use the opportunity to clear all their enemies. Their snowboards had allowed them to move effectively in the forest, and they were not about to stop unless absolutely necessary. As they cruised through the snow-caked forest, they saw large numbers of Soviet soldiers killed in many different ways. However realistic an award-winning film would shamefully fade in comparison to the unimaginable horrors that lay before them. Zhang Heng had mentally prepared himself to witness all the dead. Despite that, he felt awfully unwell after witnessing so much death in one go. The horrifying scene was a violent assault on one's senses, where war represented the worst of humanity. It also represented what would become of the frail-minded human after civilization had been so carelessly tossed away. Soldiers had regressed to their carnal instincts, to kill and protect in its most basic of forms. Looking at the sniper beside him, Zhang Heng instantly knew that the purgatory around them had almost no effect on him. He was simply used to it. As they traveled on, they came across 2 Soviet troops. They managed to evade them, only lucky that they were not spotted first. They even encountered a Soviet soldier that moved alone. His allies were most likely killed in action, and he was lucky to flee the battlefield alive. His spirit seemed broken, his face emotionless, lifeless even from all he had gone through. Having no weapons and trudging barefooted, there was a high chance he would end up dead in this forest if his allies failed to find him. Zhang Heng saw that he was getting further and further away from him, hence deciding to just let him be. Seconds later, he heard a gunshot. The sniper's hand was on the trigger of the machine gun and was no longer covering the wound. He had shot the soldier in cold blood. When the sound of gunfire reverberating in the air, the Soviet soldier slowly stopped moving and collapsed beside a pine tree. Zhang Heng then looked the sniper in the eyes, searching for answers. He did the same as well, not batting an eyelid. His eyes were dead, with not an ounce of emotion left in them. Zhang Heng was left speechless. If he was a soldier during the invasion of Japan, he would have shot any Japanese soldier if he ever encountered one. All these Finnish guerrillas only had one goal in mind, and that was to protect their people and country. For these reasons, Zhang Heng felt he had no right to criticize him. The gunshot, however, would have again attracted more enemies to them, the last thing Zhang Heng wanted. It wasn't time to play the blame game here. Besides, the sniper wouldn't understand a word even if he scolded him. It would be more beneficial for them to figure out a way to get out of this sticky situation. Zhang Heng landed his eyes on the snowboard behind the sniper, back. Voila. 5 minutes later, they tied all their goods on the snowboard, and Zhang Heng tied a rope at the end of it for the sniper to pull on it later. He then squatted down in front of him. Strangely, it seemed as if the sniper understood what he was trying to do. Immediately, he jumped on Zhang Heng's back and let him carry him. When Zhang Heng stood up, he was surprised that the sniper was a lot lighter than he'd expected, probably weighing a tiny 100 pounds. They could finally move faster now. The only downside about this idea was that Zhang Heng's stamina and strength depleted a lot more quickly than he hoped it would. He could only do this for around 20 minutes. Thank goodness they were out of the danger zone. Chapter 66. The Mannerheim Line welcomes you via. Zhang Heng still couldn't figure out where he was, only knowing that he was heading towards a northeasterly direction. He was well rested, having caught quite a few naps throughout the entire journey. The good news was he did not encounter any Soviets while they traveled. It seemed he had finally escaped the war zone. After some time, the sniper tapped his shoulder, signifying him to stop. So he stopped walking, looked for a clean stone, and carefully set the wounded man down. Though he could not see his face, Zhang Heng knew that he was in great pain just by looking at his saddened eyes. The patch of blood on his stomach was getting bigger by the minute. Although he had no problems moving around when Zhang Heng carried him earlier, the bumpy ride had aggravated his condition. And here he was again, choosing to say nothing about it. Suddenly, Zhang Heng had a bad feeling. Immediately, he took a look at his surroundings and realized that they were still in the middle of nowhere. Initially, he thought the sniper would lead them back to his base. They should have at least came across one of his allies, but judging by his current condition, he could die bleeding out any second now if he did not get any medical help. If he died here right now, it would be useless for Zhang Heng to locate the guerrilla base. They would definitely shoot him on sight if they saw him alone. This wasn't the time to worry about what might happen next. Right now, he needed to make sure the sniper was kept alive. Realizing the gravity of the situation the sniper was in, he wasted no time and looked for fallen branches hopping to start a campfire. It would help ensure the cold wouldn't get to the wounded man. Luckily, twigs were aplenty and the fire was started, much to the relief of the freezing men. Zhang Heng melted some snow in a canteen, quenching their badly scorched throats. They soon settled down under the warmth of the flames. The sniper groaned in pain but looked slightly more comfortable. Phew! After a short moment of doubt, the sniper had finally decided that it was safe to take off his white face mask, which he had worn all the while. What Zhang Heng saw left him startled in shock. The sniper was actually a girl with a golden lock of hair. Judging by her appearance, it seemed she had only just reached adulthood. It was mind-boggling for Zhang Heng to imagine such a young-looking girl was capable of so efficiently harvesting the lives of battle-hardened soldiers, reaping away every soul she wished dead. Suddenly, he remembered that during the Winter War, Finland had conscripted 3 million of their people to fight off the Soviet Union. The number of soldiers that were willing to fight and protect their county was more than that of Japan and Germany combined, ready to do whatever it took to chase out the invaders from their country. Of the many definitions of bravery one could find in a book, This, in my opinion, was its highest form. Zhang Heng stared at the sniper as she slowly sipped the warm water in her hands. Without saying a word, he then took out 2 sausages from his bag and placed it over the fire. However, the sniper simply shook her head, indicating that it was an awkward moment for them. Right now, Zhang Heng was left in a dilemma. It was now virtually impossible for the sniper to continue the journey. This was no action movie, but rather cruel reality. In the movies, soldiers would usually extract the bullet from their wounds after they were shot. On a real battlefield, on the other hand, no one would attempt such a dangerous feat. Festering wounds and infections were a major concern. The biggest problem that one could encounter while attempting a bullet extraction from an open wound was the bleeding problem. Seeing that she had lost a huge amount of blood on the way here, it was definitely not the brightest idea to extract the bullet out of her right now. Zhang Heng had to reassess the current situation. Should he stay here to take care of her or leave her alone? Right now, both of them were like different species, unable to communicate with each other. All they could do was use simple sign language to tell each other their intentions. Right now, he had no idea how far still the guerrilla base camp was, not even knowing whether they were heading in the right direction. Despite her grave wounds, the female sniper looked really calm. Zhang Heng guessed that she must have come up with a solution to overcome this problem, or she was prepared to die here. Of course, he secretly hoped that she had an idea to get them out of this sticky situation. However, judging by the way things were turning out, it was more likely that she was ready to die here. The night was arriving as the sun shone its last light. Zhang Heng chose not to leave her side in the end. After dinner, he went picking more tree branches to keep the campfire burning through the night. He then poured out half of his backpack out and placed it under the female sniper's head to act as a pillow. After all that was done, Zhang Heng took out his machine gun, attempting to study it. He tried to reload it and aim for a couple of inanimate objects lying around. To be honest, Zhang Heng was never a fan of killing. Unfortunately, he needed to learn how to protect himself in such an environment. Although he knew he would probably be unable to pull the trigger even though he encountered the Soviets, this wasn't enough of an excuse to simply just give up. At the same time, the female sniper eyed him intently. At times, Zhang Heng felt that this could not have been a person but a log. This was because only a log could forever keep its calm. She had been through a whole lot but had never once unveiled a single ounce of emotion. Under the twinkling night sky, the flames of the campfire danced with the wind. After playing with his machine gun for a bit, he suddenly noticed something amiss about the sniper. Her skin had grown much paler and all her lips were white, devoid of color. Her forehead was wet with beads of cold sweat, and her body was shaking non-stop. Zhang Heng instantly felt her feet and hands, discovering that they were like pieces of frozen meat. Her body was losing temperature, descending into hypothermia. Blood loss had caused most of the heat in her body to slip away, especially her red blood cells. Hemoglobin's main function was the vehicle transferring oxygen to the entire body. Once their count had dropped drastically, one's body would fail to function normally. If such a situation were to occur, no amount of warm clothes could keep her alive. Surely she could be saved if she was admitted to a hospital right now, getting a crucial blood transfusion. Unfortunately, they were now in the depths of a forest. There was nothing Zhang Heng could do to save her. Left with no other options, Zhang Heng removed his clothes and hugged her, hoping to share body heat and revitalize the dying girl. The female sniper simply looked at him, not knowing what to think or how to react. She didn't push him away, though. Perhaps she knew her time was near and was the verge of dying. As for Zhang Heng, he did not harbor any sexual desires towards her. After all, the both of them had not showered for several days. The body odor and the stench of blood were enough to put off the strongest of libidinous innuendo. Besides, a piece of cloth wrapped around her chest. Their skin rubbed on each other, sharing no distance and seemingly more intimate than certain rambunctious lovers. Despite all that, they did now know each other's names. Due to the language barrier, the two of them could still not communicate with each other using words. All they could do was to remain silent. Zhang Heng had managed to maintain her body temperature but could not give her back the lost blood. As time passed, the female sniper's condition worsened. Her shallow breathing became rapid, and her pulse was erratic. Zhang Heng knew deep down that she might not be able to survive the night. Then all of a sudden, he heard a crunch. Bell had taught Zhang Heng to scatter some dried tree branches around him as an alarm when it was night time. It seemed like someone had stepped on the loose twigs. He instantly jumped up and wanted to grab his machine gun. To his surprise, the person was already squatting down beside the campfire, pointing a machine gun at him. Chapter 67. The Mannerheim Line welcomes you IX. Found a Finnish guerrilla base. Game points +5. For more information, check out the character panel. Zhang Heng had only heard the sound of the notification when he spotted the little wooden cottages in the forest. Before he could take a good look at it, someone had already pointed a gun at his back. Zhang Heng was pretty sure that whoever it was, the trigger would be inevitably pulled this time. Just before he could, however, the sniper shouted at him. Startled, the shooter flinched, preventing the killing from happening. However, he did not take his sights off Zhang Heng. The cavalry had finally arrived. It was the Finnish, allies of the sniper. Soon after that, a few more came over to help her. One of them stayed back to look after her while the rest proceeded to chop some wood to make a simple stretcher to carry her back to the base. The man with the machine gun picked up the Soviet clothes on the floor and tossed them to Zhang Heng. However, the soldier had taken away the inner coat, only leaving him the outer jacket made out of goatskin. Zhang Heng said nothing and simply put it on. He could see that the members of the guerrilla resistance did not trust him at all. If it were not for the female sniper, they would have killed him without even thinking twice. Fortunately for Zhang Heng, they took care of their own first, realizing the sniper needed immediate medical attention. Knowing that there was no time to waste, they carried her back to their camp right away, even with Zhang Heng, the stranger, following behind. After walking through thick snow and ice for an hour and a half, they finally arrived at base camp. 2 fighters carried the stretcher and entered the small wooden house on the left. As for Zhang Heng, he was being locked inside another cottage. As Zhang Heng's eyes adjusted to the dark confinement space, he saw the entire place filled with lumber. He realized he must be in a wood storage house. His captors locked the room right away after they made him go inside. They even frisked him and confiscated everything they deemed a threat. His inner coat, machine gun, backpack, cell phone, and wallet were all taken from him. Through the cracks of the wooden walls, Zhang Heng saw that few of the fighters were checking out his Huawei cell phone. In this era, cell phones had not been invented yet. After curiously playing with it for a long time, none of them could figure out how to turn the curious device on. One of them even hid it on a tree. Compared to the somewhat unpopular cell phone, everyone wanted to own the wallet. Even the most ordinary of wallets from the modern era would be considered a masterpiece in 1944. Besides, Zhang Heng's wallet cost a few hundred yuan. And for the inner coat, the soldier that pointed the machine gun at Zhang Heng was already wearing it. His burly and muscular body turned the tiny garment into a skin-tight shirt. The weirdest part was, no one laid their hands on the analog watch. Logically, watches like that should worth quite a bit in this era. As if invisible, it seemed like none of them noticed it. Zhang Heng soon learned that this was a rather large base camp. Originally a lumber mill, the guerrillas had converted it into their base of operations. Hidden deep within the secluded forest, they became almost undetectable by their enemies. Through the tiny gap, Zhang Heng saw that there were 7 of them. It was late at night, and most of them were asleep in the other cottages. The guerrillas were infamously most active at night. They would launch surprise attacks at their Soviet counterparts while they were fast asleep. Zhang Heng once watched a documentary where an ex-guerrilla shared his experiences. They claimed that the Soviets would lose their will to fight once the guerrillas hit them in the dark. The few Soviet soldiers sitting around the campfire watched their allies being killed right before their eyes and did nothing about it. Judging by the size of this camp, there were at least 40 to 50 souls living here. In order to prevent another gross misunderstanding, Zhang Heng decided that he should stop peeking at them. He then looked for a corner, lay on the ground, and closed his eyes. Around 20 minutes later, 2 guerrillas opened the door and entered the storage. This time, they weren't pointing their guns at Zhang Heng. After what seemed like an instruction to him in Finnish, they moved him to another unit. Of course, Zhang Heng would not be so dumb as to incriminate himself, so he simply did what they asked him to do. The wooden house that he entered this time was different than the storage unit. This cottage looked more like a real living space, equipped with a wooden bed, chairs, tables, and a cozy-looking fireplace. A man with thick mustache sat behind the table. He put away the map on the table as he saw Zhang Heng entering the room. He then used his hand as a signal for him to sit down. Zhang Heng guessed that this man probably was the commander of the guerrilla armies. There was also another person standing at the window and smoking. Zhang Heng could not clearly see who this person was since the back was turned. All he knew was that the person was a woman in her 30s or 40s. Once Zhang Heng sat down, the mustached man demanded him to talk. "I must apologize. I don't know how to speak in your language." For good measure, Zhang Heng repeated the sentence in Mandarin, English, and Japanese. Still, the man could not understand what he was trying to say. After some time, he grew impatient. Suddenly, the woman that was smoking broke her silence. "Are you a spy from the Soviet Union?" asked the woman in English. She was the first person that could communicate with him ever since he took this quest. He finally could let out a sigh of relief. The thing that worried him the most was the communication barrier he had suffered since apparating here. Without efficient communication, he would be unable to take control of his current situation. At least, he could now defend himself. "Clement Voroshilov might be stupid, but I don't think he is dumb enough to send us a Chinese spy that doesn't speak Finnish. I'm not too sure about that. After all, some people can't even differentiate between a loaf of bread and a bomb," said the woman as she stubbed out the cigarette. This time she turned around and looked at Zhang Feng. This woman must have been incredibly gorgeous when she was younger, or, should I say, still rather dazzling for her age. Some simply had the power to defy the physics of the chronometer. After that, she looked at the man with the mustache. The man only smiled and left the house after. "Ajay is not a bad person. This is a very critical period. He's responsible for all those under him." "I can understand that," said Zhang Heng. "No, you can't, and I can't either. His country is being invaded by enemies right now. To protect his motherland, he is willing to do whatever it takes, even if it means going to hell itself. What you see is what you get, Gov. I'm a volunteer from England. I should inform you that I am different from these people. I don't wish to see bloodshed. For me to help you, I will need you to tell me the truth," said the woman while drawing another stick of craven A. As she bent down, Zhang Heng took a glimpse at her cleavage. He had to say, this woman was really something. If he was indeed a spy of the Soviet Union, he would have definitely spilled all the beans. Unfortunately, the truth was concealed within the most ridiculous of answers. In this war, Zhang Heng was indeed an outsider who had nothing to do with it. Chapter 68. The Mannerheim Line welcomes you X. The woman sitting across him asked him a few other questions. Questions like why he was here, was there someone else with him, was he a communist? Zhang Heng answered all her questions honestly. For the past few days, he did not just loiter in the forest. While traveling, he had been carefully planning how he could handle a situation like this if he ever got into one. Hence, the woman could not fault him. Throughout the conversation, Zhang Heng managed to acquire some information about her as well. Her name was Maggie, a surgeon. After the feminist movement, women's status in society greatly improved. Despite all that, it was a rarity for a woman to become a surgeon in this era. After graduation, Maggie had to leave her motherland for Switzerland, spending some time there before moving back to Finland to work in a hospital. When the war broke out, she did not leave Finland, instead choosing to stay behind as a volunteer. She was the only doctor for the entire base camp, and the man with the mustache, Ajay, was the second lieutenant in this camp. His job was to command the guerrilla troops. As she was finished with her questioning, Maggie squinted and stared hard at Zhang Heng. "I know what you want now. However, I can't make the decision right now. Go back to where you come from. I will relay everything that you told me to Ajay." "How is she doing?" asked Zhang Heng before leaving the cottage. "About her, real lucky she was. brought back in the nick of time. The surgery was a huge success. I have given her a good few pints of blood. 2 days ago, we received a batch of anti-inflammatories from Switzerland. She should be fine. I think she should regain consciousness by tomorrow morning, Maggie replied while staring blankly. Zhang Heng could sense that her mind was elsewhere when she answered his question. She might have been thinking about personal business or about the guerrillas. Whatever it was, he knew that this was not the right time to ask. Simply nodding his head, he headed back to the storeroom. This time, he waited for a long time before someone knocked at his door. When dawn had broken, a guerrilla fighter came into the storeroom and delivered the first meal of the day. His breakfast included a bowl of venison soup, half a loaf of bread, and blueberry jam. The food they served here was way better than the Soviet rations he was forced to live on. This was the advantage of fighting as Finland's warriors. Though the guerrillas had to continually hide deep in the mountains, they would constantly receive supplies from the villages nearby them. These villagers were unyielding, often informing them of the Soviets' positions in the forest. For the past few days, Zhang Heng had been hiding here and there. It had been a long time since he had a proper meal. As he had done everything he was capable of, it was useless to worry about things he couldn't control. He might as well sit down and enjoy the great food in front of him. It wasn't until the afternoon before Maggie visited again. I'm really sorry we can't send you to the back of the battle line. This is a pivotal moment for the war right now. We don't have enough people to escort you to the back of the line. Just point me in the right direction and give me some supplies. I think I can travel there by myself. Maggie simply smiled. It then dawned on Zhang Heng, as he finally knew the reason behind it. Your identity is suspicious, and we don't even know where you come from. Though we can't fault anything that you've told us, it is basically impossible for us to verify your information as well. Besides, now you know where the guerrilla base camp is. There's no way that we will let you go just like that, said the doctor. Zhang Heng was speechless. Ajay is the kind of person that dislikes trouble, and it might not be fair to you. Since we have no way to rule out that you are not a Soviet spy, killing you would be the easiest solution for us. There are dead bodies everywhere around here. All we need to do is kill you and toss your body at an obscure spot on the battlefield. No one would ever know that we were the ones who killed you. Maggie then paused her speech, seeming as if she was hoping to see fear ooze out from Zhang Heng's face. Unfortunately, the way he acted left her in disappointment. He knew that if they wanted to kill him, they would not have sent the doctor all the way here and spend all this time talking to him. It was totally pointless for a bunch of mercenaries to put on such an elaborate show. Good news is, the sniper that you rescued is returning the favor. From the first day I've known her until now, I have never seen her talk so much in one day. Since she can vouch for you, Ajay is willing to give you an opportunity to prove if you are a friend or an enemy of Finland. Well, what do you mean by that? Congratulations. You've passed the test and are one of us now. That female sniper is lacking a partner. Both of you will go on a mission together once she has fully recovered. Zhang Heng realized that this was the best offer he could get for now. Though a lot different from what he expected, he knew that he had no right to reject the offer. Rejecting the proposal would mean certain death for him. This could be either a good or bad change to Zhang Heng's current situation. The good was that he could take his mind off the supply problem, since the logistics from the guerrilla base camp would have that covered. He also had a powerful partner with him right now, where Zhang Heng had witnessed firsthand the exceptional marksmanship of the sniper. He would never need to worry that she would miss her target. Then there was the bad part. Zhang Heng was now forced into a war he never intended to fight. He had been switched from an observer to a solider. Everything he would face from now on was going to be a risk to his life. He had never received any military training before and was very sure that the man with mustache knew all about it. Despite knowing the boy couldn't fight, he had put forward such a proposal. I have not shot out of a firearm before. Can you at least allow me to get some training first? Of course, that is a perfectly reasonable request. Before that kid recovers, you can do whatever you want as long as you don't leave this place. Maggie was shocked to see Zhang Heng acting so calmly. despite being thrown around and coerced into a war. She suddenly realized that she could not read this young man. His level of maturity did not match his current age at all. It was rare for such a young man to maintain his composure in the situation he was forced into. Zhang Heng had managed to pique her interest. "What kind of weapon do you wish to use? M28 machine gun. Suomi KP submachine gun. That one might be hard for you to get your hands on. We also have the Degtyaryov machine gun that we confiscated from the Soviets in our armory. If possible, I want to train on a machine gun and a handgun first." Zhang Heng would prioritize protecting himself over anything else. Though machine guns and submachine guns were really powerful, they were also very, very loud. That meant the enemy would instantly pinpoint the shooter's position. It was best for him not to attract the attention of the enemies. Kill counts were pointless to him. He already knew how this war would end. Shooting aside, I think you should train your snowboarding skills as well. The snow is thick here. It would be more effective for you to slide around with a snowboard rather than walking your way through the ice. It might even come in handy one day, saving your life and all that, said Maggie while lighting up a fag. For once, a practical suggestion. The snowboard was the signature item of the Finnish guerrilla forces, allowing them to move around freely at a ridiculous speed. They were the infamous ghosts of the war, whizzing their invisible way through the darkness. They were legends, never to be surrounded by their enemies. Chapter 69. The Mannerheim Line welcomes you, Zai. Maggie brought Zhang Heng to meet the logistics guy responsible for the firearms. He was an old hunter with a pronounced limp. At the same time, he doubled as the resident chef for the base camp as well. The breakfast that Zhang Heng had earlier. Yeah, that was him too. Maggie gave the old man a quick hug and spoke in Finnish, telling him about the newcomer. As they talked, Maggie passed him half a pack of cigarettes. The older man then stared at Zhang Heng and nodded his head, albeit somewhat unwillingly. He flipped his remuneration into his pocket, turned around, and entered the house behind him. Oher will show you later how to use the machine gun. He's one of the most accomplished hunters over here. His tens of years of experience are more than good enough to teach you everything you need to know about a machine gun. Don't worry about the language barrier. I'll be your translator. If you have any questions, feel free to voice it out, said Maggie. Zhang Heng was surprised at how Maggie was so helpful all of a sudden. She did not seem like the kind of person to stick her nose in the business of others. "The girl requested me to help you. My hands are tied. She's the reason why I can still continue to smoke, so it's hard for me to say no to her. I consider this favor as repaying her back." It was apparent that Maggie was in no intention to hide the truth. She then paused and stared at Zhang Heng suspiciously. "Seber told me that you and the female sniper were." Zhang Heng blushed, not knowing what to answer. During that perilous time, Zhang Heng was left with no other option if he was to keep her alive. Considering the nature of how it happened, though, it would be hard for anybody to believe him even if he was telling the truth. Luckily, good old Oher saved the day, coming out from the house in the nick of time right after Maggie asked the question. He then handed a machine gun to Zhang Heng. "This machine gun that you are holding is an M28. It is an improved version of the M1891 Massennagen and is way more accurate when it fires. Weapons are scarce here. You better not lose it." Maggie translated everything to Zhang Heng, and he was thankful he could finally find common ground with these people. "Besides the gun, Oher has given you 70 rounds as well. You need to know that these bullets are not just for shooting practice. You will need them when you go on your first mission. I would advise you to use them wisely." Maggie paused for a while before continuing. "Now, you can claim 40 rounds here before you go on a mission. If you run out of ammo, you can get it from the dead Soviets that you killed. Alternatively, you can exchange something valuable for bullets. I'll give you an example. Guns and medicines are precious at the base camp. Bring home some if you can. And if you manage to get your hands on a T-26 tank and drive it back to the base camp, you will have my heartiest congratulations. That is because it will grant you full access to your arsenal." While Maggie was talking, a few guerrillas brought over a Maxim heavy machine gun, looking like they had just got back to the base camp not too long ago, and they had won the battle. Some of them were even bold enough to whistle at Magi when they saw her. Seeing the colossal cannon-like weapon rolling by, Zhang Heng jumped aside and let them move the lumbering gun into the armory. Then, Oher jotted something down on his notebook. Only after did the excited guerrillas leave the armory did Oher finally started explaining how a machine gun was used. Zhang Heng made sure as well to pay proper attention to every single word he said. After all, Magi would not be there every single time to translate for him. Not like she would be in such an elegant mood every single day anyway. The next day, Magi brought Zhang Heng to visit a gorilla that was really good at snowboarding. The small favor she asked had cost her half a pack of cigarettes, buying Zhang Heng one snowboarding lesson for half a day. Zhang Heng had gone snowboarding a couple of times back home. With the added guidance, he managed to perform a lot better than yesterday. After 2 days, Magi finally grew impatient and left Zhang Heng to do whatever he wanted to do. Luckily, Zhang Heng had learned everything that he needed to learn to keep himself alive while he was out on a mission. So he searched for a secluded place and started practicing everything he learned for the past 2 days. Snowboarding shouldn't be too tall of an order for Zhang Heng since he had done it before. Shooting, on the other hand, was a totally different story. When it came to the theory, he knew almost everything about weapons. All he needed to do right now was to familiarize himself with it. He needed to make sure that his fingers would become accustomed to pulling the trigger at living enemies. Right now, he had only 70 bullets with him, and though he tried to spare as many as possible, he still spent 40 bullets in 2 days. If he was shooting in real life, going through 40 bullets would take him a mere 2 minutes. After the shooting practice, Zhang Heng was flabbergasted, realizing that his shooting skills barely scraped the level of 0, and Zhang Heng did not know what to do anymore. He now had to conserve the bullets for his next mission. To survive in his upcoming mission, he expected that he would need to have 30 rounds with him. At most, he could only afford to spend another 10 bullets. Any more than that and he would turn into a corpse on the battlefield. Quite frankly, 10 bullets wouldn't make much of a difference. There was nothing Zhang Heng could do about it, and since he could not leave base camp to look for more ammo, he could only exchange for them with Oher. Unfortunately, his valuables had been confiscated by the other guerrillas. On top of that, Zhang Heng had no intention to get it back from them because he knew that it was pointless. Those weren't the types to return something they came into possession of. Finders keepers. With that being said, his shooting practice had come to an end. On the 3rd day, Zhang Heng went back to where he first practiced shooting. To his pleasant surprise, he found 3 boxes of bullets under the white birch, a total of 45 rounds. Now, who could it be? Zhang Heng was the one who picked the location for the shooting practice, and no one else knew about it. This was located some distance away from the base camp. Until now, he still had no idea why the gunner that he met in the forest was still acted hostile towards him, suspecting that the others might have felt uncomfortable as well. He realized he was now stuck here for some time. In the interest of avoiding prying eyes and to stay out of trouble, he thought it best to look for a more covert spot. He was delighted, never expecting to find so many bullets here. Admittedly, that solved the huge problem of the lack of ammunition. He wondered who had the generosity to leave him such handsome bounty. In truth, it was not that difficult to figure out who left it here. There was only one person in the base camp fond of Zhang Heng. As it had been left there, finders keepers, he thought and used all of it for the shooting practice. The next day, 3 boxes of rounds were being left under the trees again. This time, his cell phone, wallet, wooden sculpture, and rabbit's foot were laid beside as well. Except for his inner coat, all of his personal belongings had returned to him. Instead of carrying on with his shooting practice, he knocked on the Magi's door. "What's going on?" groaned Magi with a yawn, her sleepy voice proof that she had just woken up. "Good morning, Ms. Magi. I'm here to look for someone." Zhang Heng knew that the female sniper stayed together with Magi in the same wooden cottage. "Oi, your bloke's here to look for you. Should I tell him that you are here?" Chilly winds were starting to close in, causing a shivering Magi to tighten the neckline of her nightgown. Half a minute later, Maggie stood aside and allowed Zhang Heng to enter. The sniper was lying on the bed and had her back facing the entrance with a blanket wrapped like a burrito around her. Zhang Heng could only make out half her head. It seemed like she was still sleeping. Maggie then walked over to her bed and pulled the blanket away. The neatly dressed blonde-haired sniper was presented before Zhang Heng. Simone, you can't avoid your partner forever, right? Chapter 70. The Mannerheim line welcomes you XII. Knowing that she had been busted, she couldn't pretend to sleep anymore. So, she reluctantly got up and sat on her bed. After getting a good couple of days' rest, she definitely looked a lot better than before. However, Zhang Heng realized that she did not dare look him in the eye. Can you please translate for us again? Zhang Heng politely asked Maggie. Just say what you want to say. Maggie took out another cigarette in anticipation as she smiled at Zhang Heng. Thank you for much for vouching for me. I came here once to visit you before, but Dr. Maggie said that you needed more rest, so I did not get to see you. Simone looked at him and blinked. Despite attempting to put on her best poker face, Zhang Heng could see a pang of deep-seated guilt hidden behind those dreamy blue eyes. Not knowing if it was the wrong thing to say, Zhang Heng omitted the part about getting back his personal belongings and the extra bullets under the tree. My home is in a land far away. Due to some reason, I'm stranded here. Once the war is over, I will return to the place I came from, said Zhang Heng. Simone seemed disappointed after hearing what Zhang Heng had to say. Zhang Heng knew that she had grown fond of him after what happened to them in the woods. From what he saw, it seemed like Simone was a high-ranking guerrilla in this base camp. He could have easily taken advantage of her fondness toward him and have a better life right here. If he did that, however, he would definitely bring great sorrow to Simone when the day to leave finally arrived. Sometimes, Zhang Heng had doubts if this was really just a game. His entire experience so far had proven too realistic for him to handle. Everything was so real it became hard to consider those around him like a bunch of programmed NPC. Zhang Heng also wondered what would happen to this virtual world once he left. What would happen to the people around here? Would the tail soldier on without him? Despite it all, he knew that it was hard to lie to the only girl fond of him in the entire camp. Eventually, Zhang Heng decided that he would tell her the plain old truth. It might seem unwise in the current climate, but he was willing to risk it and stick on to his principles. Simone looked lost after the conversation. She was just sat mum on the bed, unable to utter a single word. Noticing tension in the atmosphere, Maggie closed the door behind her and talked to Zhang Heng. I thought you looked smart for a man. You really should never say such cruel words to a girl. However, I think I kinda like you right now. Simone might be a masterful marksman, but she is extremely innocent. She has never been in a relationship in her entire life. Before the war, she lived with her great-grandfather deep in the forest, and all she did growing up was hunting. Ajay and I initially thought that you harbored ill intentions towards her. It seems that I have misunderstood you. Maggie then paused, lighting up another cigarette. I have come across many men in this life. Most of the ones I know have a dick in place of their brains. Although they would instantly fall for women who showed fondness towards them, the ending is usually the same. Waking up in the morning, feeling an empty space beside you, finding out that you have been left all alone in the bedroom. Such is the nature of men, right? So, you guys have finally agreed to send me to the back of the battlefield? Asked Zhang Heng as he ignored her rambling. About that, I must apologize. It's simply not possible. I didn't exactly lie about everything the last time we talked. Compared to the Soviet military, we severely lack skilled fighters. Since you are all dandy and healthy, you turn up as a perfect add-on to the force. Don't worry, Maggie assured him. I will help you solve your gun problem. Later on, I will see who has remained at the base camp. Weller and his team just came back yesterday, so I don't think they are heading out today. They should have plenty of time to give you a few shooting lessons later. However, I feel they don't like you too much. How about Mike? I wonder if he's here right now. Suddenly, the door was pushed open. Simone was barged in and whispered something in Finnish to Maggie, leaving her startled. She then turned around, relaying to Zhang Heng what Simone just told her. Simone told me that she wants to be the one that teaches you how to shoot better, Maggie whispered while smiling slyly. This amazed him. Considering how he had just let his tongue slip, her heart would have been broken, much less willing to teach him anything. Is she even okay? Are you doubting my medical skills? This is the 5th day. She'll be fine as long as she does not overexert herself, grumbled Maggie with one of her eyebrows twitched. Of course, Zhang Heng would not reject the offer. He knew that it was challenging to find someone good to teach him. Earlier, all Oher did was summarize the entire course of shooting better. When he was practicing, he encountered a new problem. He did not approach Oher to ask about it, though. And this was not the 21st century. He couldn't just simply get on Baidu or watch a bunch of online tutorials to help to shoot better. It was undeniably that Simone shot as good as she looked. Zhang Heng personally witnessed her exterminating 2 Soviet scout teams on her own, never once needing a second bullet to kill her target. It was all a one-shot, one-kill business. It was hard to believe that she acquired such great skills, even at such a young age. Zhang Heng grew more and more curious about the girl's origins, of how she got so bloody good at what she did. Simone was the kind of girl that took her own sweet time. Since she happened to be dressed and he had a rifle with him, they all proceeded to his secret shooting range. Both of you spare my life, please. I haven't even had my breakfast yet, lamented Maggie. What? Zhang Heng was shocked to see Oher giving Simone bullets every single time she asked for it. She must have contributed a great deal to the war effort. Simone was known to continually empty the already limited armory of ammo. Poor Oher had to hide someplace whenever she came asking for more. Unfortunately, the base camp was more like small confinement. Oher had to cook for everyone every day, so it wasn't hard for Simone to find him. In the end, due to the shortage, he had to increase its price. Right now, ammunition had turned into the most valuable loot for all the guerrilla members. This week alone, Zhang Heng had lost count of how many bullets he had fired. This was the first time he experienced the joy of unlimited rounds. Right now, he was lying low on the snow-covered ground as he controlled his breathing. He had his rifle loaded and aimed for the target 30 meters away from him. Without hesitation, he pulled the trigger. Seconds later, there was a loud thunk as the metal cup on the wooden block was sent flying. Zhang Heng then heard a notification. Acquired new skill shooting, LV0. This was the very first time he managed to learn an entirely new skill set in such a short period of time. All in all, it had only taken him the better half of a week. However, it seemed like Simone was displeased with his progress. She took out her rifle, cocked it, and pulled the trigger. The bullet landed on the tiny matchbox located 120 meters away from them. The best part, it took her only 2 seconds to hit her target. Zhang Heng was left tongue-tied. There was still a gaping gap between them. Without a scope, it was hard for Zhang Heng to land a shot on his target. He had no idea how Simone managed to land an accurate shot that was so far away from them. Her dexterity and speed were simply too impressive. When a sniper went against another sniper, speed was the factor that decided who lived or died. If Simone was his enemy, Zhang Heng knew that she would have killed him before he even picked up his gun. Chapter 71. The Mannerheim line welcomes you XIII. Though Zhang Heng spent most of his time brushing up his shooting, he made sure that he would not neglect snowboarding as well. Unfortunately, training on the snowboard didn't go as smoothly as the shooting practice. Simone's snowboarding skill was decent, but it didn't come close to her shooting skills. Besides, as she was still recovering from her injuries, it was a terrible idea for her to do such vigorous exercise. Hence, she sat it out most of the time and watched Zhang Heng practice instead. Maggie stayed with them for only 2 days. After that, she grew impatient and bored with the translator job. Before they even realized it, Maggie had already made a quick escape, running to deal with other more pressing matters. Luckily, Zhang Heng and Simone only needed to communicate with each other during training. Though they did not share a common language, hand signals were sufficient for Zhang Heng to understand most of her instructions. Most of the time, there was an awkward silence between them. Simone would watch Zhang Heng from the side when he practiced shooting. It was almost always freezing, up here in the north. As a snowflake landed on her nose tip, she could not help but sneeze. There. Along with that, Zhang Heng found out that Simone had started to learn English from Maggie. Ironically, the first sentence that she learned was, "Can you kiss me?" So the next morning, as Zhang Heng was brushing his teeth, he suddenly heard Simone's first English words. Shocked and taken aback, he almost swallowed the toothpaste in his mouth when he heard Simone asking him to kiss her. Later on, he discovered that Simone actually intended to say good morning to him. Undoubtedly, only Maggie could fool around with her in such a silly way. Zhang Heng himself wanted to learn Finnish as well. After all, it was never a bad idea to learn a new language. Besides, he could communicate with the people around him. However, there were very few consonants in Finnish. Instead, it had long words, rich vowels, and very complicated grammar. Little wonder why it was considered as one of the hardest languages to master. With all things considered, this seemed to be the wrong time to learn a new language, a very hard one at that. In order to survive the war, he first had to improve his shooting and snowboarding prowess. Of course, it wasn't impossible for him to learn if he put his heart into it. He soon realized that there were some crucial words that had to be acquired instantly. Words like open fire, cease fire, retreat, and cover were critical on the battlefield. So here he was, trying to learn some words that were frequently used daily. Although such a short time would prove impossible for him to come up with full sentences, a single word would surely help a lot to express what he was trying to say. Maggie naturally became the busiest person in the base camp, having to teach Simone English and Zhang Heng Finnish at the same time while being the doctor as well. The good thing here was that Zhang Heng was very productive by nature. He transformed from a man who had never held a gun in his life to a lethal mercenary that could shoot accurately. At the same time, he snowboarded well now, swiftly sliding through the icy lands like a white phantom. He had undoubtedly improved by leaps and bounds during this period. Though he still couldn't be compared to a full-blown Finnish guerrilla, most members, including Maggie, were secretly impressed by his rapid improvement. Simone's good teaching contributed most to his improvement. As Zhang Heng had previously spent a great deal of time honing his archery skills, he had a good grasp of the basics of aiming. Regretfully, his goal of getting his shooting and snowboarding to level 1 seemed impossible to achieve. On his 13th day here, something that was bound to happen finally took place. Simone had almost fully recovered from her wounds. If it was not for Zhang Heng, she would have left the base camp 3 days ago. In order to make sure he received the best training, she elected to stay behind for a few more days. Today was the day that the guerrilla troops received a message from the villagers nearby, informing them that a platoon of Soviet soldiers rushing somewhere had been spotted. Immediately, Ajay summoned all the available guerrillas to discuss taking out the troops. Predictably, every single one of them concurred. Simone, too, had asked for approval to join this mission. Zhang Heng did not attend the meeting but sensed that the guerrilla members were filled with excitement. All of them were cleaning their weapons, checking their backpacks, and discussing strategies. Clearly, the atmosphere at the base camp had changed. Even lunch was a lot better than the usual. Simone then told Zhang Heng in English that they were about to go on a mission. In turn, Zhang Heng replied to her in Finnish. Both of them looked for Oher, managing to claim 4 days' worth of ammunition and supplies. As a bonus, Zhang Heng was presented with a set of camouflaged attire as well. He no longer needed to wear that rather unsightly khaki-colored Soviet uniform. It would be a lie to say that Zhang Heng was not nervous. After all, he was about to enter an active war zone. He was different from all those guerrillas, having nothing against the Soviets. Whether he wanted it or not, though, he would soon be dipping his hands into a lake filled with Soviet blood. Wars were merciless. Everyone involved in such brutal acts against each other would eventually be forced to do something they never intended to. Zhang Heng stuffed the toiletries and a roll of bandage into his backpack. These items were separated from the dried meat and vegetables. Simone was worried about his mental state. While packing, she kept peeping at him, worried that the rookie would somehow break down and desert the four. However, it seemed that Zhang Heng was strangely serene. his mood no different from going for a training session. Her worries slowly subsided. This, this place was no cozy study room. This place was not a quiet library that was flooded with sunlight. Zhang Heng wished he could comfortably sprawl on a sofa in some quiet place to prepare his mind for the rigors of war. Unless he shared the same fate with Desmond Doss, most people would only get one of two endings on a battlefield: to kill or be killed. This had nothing to do with moral codes. Survival was the priority here. Zhang Heng slung his snowboard and the M28 at his back. Simone was waiting at the entrance when he opened the door. As she saw him, she hesitated before mustering enough courage to give him a 1-second hug. "Don't worry, I will protect you," said Simone. A strange sensation overwhelmed Zhang Heng, this being the first time a girl had said such a thing to him. And the weirdest part was, he found it really hard to refuse her. In the end, he nodded his head and replied, "Me too." Both of them did not leave for the mission when the other guerrillas did. This was only because Simone was used to acting alone. In her younger days, she was trained to hunt by herself. Even after joining the guerrillas, she never wanted to partner with others as well. To ensure Zhang Heng would survive till the end of this war, she broke her lone shooter chastity for the first time and requested him as her partner. Still, she was not used to being with someone else. While they were on the road, Simone walked briskly and was ahead of Zhang Heng. Soon, a 1-meter distance drew between the two of them. Night had fallen, and the temperature had fallen by tens of degrees. Before long, Zhang Heng notified Simone that it was time for dinner. After living desolated on an island for a year and a half, Zhang Heng's cooking had improved a lot. When it came to the simple ingredients that they had, he could transform them into something delicious. Hence, he volunteered to start the fire to cook for the two of them. As she stared at the hypnotizing flames, Simone zoned out. Suddenly, she thought of something and her face turned red. Initially, she had just sat there quietly, but right now, she found it really hard to sit still. Fumbling, she showed Zhang Heng a hand signal, indicating that she should check out their surroundings first. Clearly, it didn't seem like a valid excuse, as they had just left the base camp not too long ago. There was still some distance between them and the Soviets. Other than trees and deer around them, there were no other living beings along a 10-mile radius. Perhaps this strange silence was the reason Simone felt so uneasy. Chapter 72. The Mannerheim Line welcomes you XIV. The night went by peacefully. On the afternoon of the second day, Simone found the footprints of Soviet soldiers. It seemed like they just passed here yesterday. According to the prints, there should be around 100 to 200 people. There were also tracks all over the ground left behind by wheels of some kind. It was a high possibility that they dragged along heavy machine guns with them. After snowboarding for the entire afternoon, they finally got close to their targets just before sundown. It seemed that the Soviets moved at a snail's pace. Considering that the snow on the ground was half a meter thick, it was extremely hard for soldiers and horses to move around as they pleased. When the terrain got too tough, the soldiers would be forced to free the stuck carts, heaving and pushing with whatever little strength they had left. The combination of poor weather and bad news from the front lines took a big hit on the soldiers' morale. They were supposed to carry out the attack in 16 days, but had failed miserably in doing so. If Zhang Heng remembered correctly, most of the Soviet troops would be eventually eliminated by the Finnish guerrillas. Every single frontline soldier sent to Finland by the Soviets had been overwhelmed by fear. Typically, soldiers that left their homeland to fight a war abroad would be left with very low morale. Despite the Soviets' best attempts to boost their spirits, the results turned out a lot worse than expected. After the purge, some experienced mid- and high-ranking officers were either executed on the spot or sent to Siberian gulags. Most of the young officers that were promoted had just graduated from military college. Their loyalty toward their homeland was unquestionable. Like brainwashed zombies, they had only one purpose, and that was to follow orders. These were perfect for battles that required cannon fodder, or ones that required little thinking but rather a mass horde of killing machines. Right now, they were facing problems from all directions, with their young officers not knowing how to handle their dejected subordinates. After checking the soldiers out with a pair of binoculars, Simone passed it to Zhang Heng. What she saw was a classic Soviet military formation. There were around 150 people in total, where the front line was made up of 3 rows of foot soldiers equipped with 12 light machine guns, 2 heavy machine guns, and then some grenade dischargers that looked like spades. Most were using the M1891 Mosin Nagant. For a long time, this rifle was a signature weapon of the Soviets. In terms of firepower, it was rather potent, especially the Maxim heavy machine gun. In theory, it could shoot up to 600 rounds per minute, powerful enough to shoot down flying airplanes. Zhang Heng was worried that the reflection of the binoculars might give away their location, only taking short glances in between. Both him and the sniper decided it was best to retreat for now, only returning later that night. Simone had already started to bury herself with the snow around her. She then signaled him with her hand, asking him to retreat first. For the past week, they had been training together, and he thought that he knew how excellent her shooting skills were. He could not help but take a deep breath when he found out about her intentions. 700 meters lay between them and the targets. If one used the sight bead to aim at a target 300 meters away, the red dot in the scope would be larger than the target. 500 meters was considered the maximum distance a shooter could accurately discern it. It was practically impossible to take out a person that was 700 meters away. Zhang Heng had no idea what kind of sniper could achieve such a great feat. The one thing he knew was that he had to trust his partner with everything he had, come what may. As he mulled over those thoughts in amazement, Zhang Heng carried both of their snowboards 1 mile from where Simone hid. He heard a gunshot the moment he lay down. Right after that, loud chaos broke out among the Soviets. Although he could not see what had happened from his distance, he could imagine how terrifying a situation they must be in. The first thing they would do was to lie flat on the ground and attempt to locate the sniper. Unfortunately, no one would have expected that shot actually came from 700 meters away. After a short back and forth of crossfire, the Soviets had enough. They loaded their Maxim heavy machine guns and grenade launchers at the same time. As the powerful cannon started its assault, the sound of the M28 was utterly drowned out. They would never be able to locate where Simone was. This kind of battle had a significant impact on a soldier's morale. Simone could only kill 1 person each time she fired, and the overpowered Soviets were enough to destroy the entire Milky Way. Despite having the big guns, despair eventually subjugated them. Their firepower was deemed useless when they faced an invisible sniper that was a good 700 meters away from them. Like a rampant plague, fear had started to spread among the ranks of the Soviets. The shooting finally came to a stop 5 minutes later. Some soldiers were still holding up their rifles, cautiously scanning their surroundings. The fear of dying at any moment began to fester in them. From the beginning till the end, they had not located the lone sniper. However, some stray bullets still landed at Simone's hideout. Zhang Heng was incredibly worried that she might have been shot. Thankfully, he soon saw Simone approaching him and was filled with relief. Nothing had changed on Simone except for her rapid breathing. She then spat out some snow from her mouth and drew the number 12 in the air with her finger. In total, Simone used 30 bullets, and she managed to kill 1 with every 3 shots. The kill count might not be impressive, but if one considered the fact that she killed enemies that were 700 meters away from her, it was nothing less than a miraculous feat. Her main target were the ones on the heavy machine guns, killing almost 7 out of the 14 gunners. She even managed to kill an officer right before he threw a grenade at her. While the Soviets were blinded by chaos, Zhang Heng and Simone managed to increase the distance between them. And this was how Zhang Heng's shootout ended. Throughout the entire stint, he did not fire a single bullet. He was just an observer, witnessing his partner killing their enemies. Simone, on the other hand, did not look too excited about her recent achievement. There was still half an hour left before the sky turned dark. Simone had no plans to waste any second, so they quickly switched to another spot. She then carried on with the unfinished business, ticking off the rest of the enemies one after another. There was nothing the Soviets could do about her. They had the numbers, but if they deployed all 100 soldiers to search the forest, it would only be easier for Simone to pick them off one by one. Only a sniper could kill a sniper. A heavy machine gun was basically useless right now. This was the problem that the Soviet commanders could never solve throughout the duration of the Winter War. Unfortunately, they did not realize how valuable a sniper would be during that period. Thus, they paid the hefty price of hundreds of thousands of souls before they established their own sniper brigade. Many years later, though, the Soviet Union would eventually become the country with the most snipers. In the battle with the Nazis, they had snipers deployed at every single crevasse, rooftop, and ruin in the city. Chapter 73. The Mannerheim Line welcomes you XV. The surprise attack threw the entire Soviet troops into a disorganized chaos. However, this was not the end of it. Their nightmare was officially set to begin that night. During the nighttime, visibility had significantly reduced, making it a lot harder for the troops to spot the guerrilla members hiding in the forest. Without a visible target, they would not know where to fire. After an entire day of traveling on foot, most of the soldiers were famished and fatigued. Usually, during this hour, they would start to prepare and cook their dinner. Nothing was usual about this time, as there was a sharpshooting reaper hiding in the dark, getting ready to harvest their souls, one bullet at a time. There were many dead bodies lying beside them, courtesy of the sniper, discouraging them from starting a fire to cook. Moments like these displayed the weakness of the young and inexperienced commanding officer. He did not know if he should fortify the place in anticipation of backup, or simply take off and never look back. Sadly for them, another force of guerrillas soon arrived, surrounding them. Then, with a merciless blow, launched the second wave of attacks on this unlucky Soviet brigade. The guerrillas with their submachine guns snowboarded their way in the dark forest right to the heart of the enemy base camp. The moment they saw the Soviets, they started to open fire. Though there were only 20 of them, their courage and blitz attack had caught the Soviets off guard. Besides, Simon had taken care of 2 teams of their machine gunners. It was soon apparent that the reaction of the rest of the soldiers was a lot slower. In their mess and confusion, the guerrillas had already finished shooting. By that time, the guerrillas had left with their snowboards and turned to other locations to strike other brigades. Still, 2 guerrillas got hit, where one of them was shot in the head, falling off from his snowboard. Another one was shot in the shoulder, but he managed to escape in the end. As for Simone, she had her rifle locked and loaded. Usually, she would start opening fire at single targets when the other guerrillas launched their attacks. Once the surprise attack was over, she had killed another 8 enemies. The combination of an invisible super shooter and the Baltic ferociousness of the Finnish had managed to completely devastate the morale among the Soviet ranks. Within 3 minutes, another 20 dead bodies piled up on the ground, and 30 soldiers were severely wounded. Amongst these, 7 were critical, choking, and bleeding out. It seemed they would not pull through the night. As for the rest, there was no way they would make their way to any battlefield without receiving medical attention. However, they would best forget their intentions, considering the agonized wails and screams of the decapitated conscripts. The Soviets were already in extreme distress when the guerrilla attacked earlier. In order to save ammo and avoid friendly fire, they retreated, for now, halting the attack and hiding out in the forest to wait for the perfect moment to strike again. They were like predators stalking their prey from Agar. Though the Soviets greatly outnumbered and had a lot more firepower than the guerrillas, it did little to affect them. To them, the Soviets were simply dead meat on the chopping board. Since Finland was located far up north near the Arctic, they had very long nights and only a few hours of daylight. They were accustomed to the dark, having honed their skills in the nights. This proved a great advantage to them when overpowering the uninitiated Slavs. Zhang Heng and Simon too retreated to a safe place. They even found a little time to have dinner. Of course, in order to stay hidden, there was no fire. Perhaps the food was undercooked, hence its rather unsavory nature. After a short while, they saw someone gliding towards them on a snowboard. The man passed, creating a cloud trail of snow and frost behind him. Zhang Heng recognized the man. He was the same one who had brought him back to base camp with a submachine gun pointed at him. After spending some time at the base camp, Zhang Heng got to know his name as well. He was called Weller and was the one most hostile towards Zhang Heng. He must have followed the signs Simone had left on the path when she moved here. Zhang Heng could roughly guess that he was here to discuss the time for the next round of attacks. The splash of snow and ice was an attempt to show off his skills to Zhang Heng, raising his eyebrows in intimidation, as if courting a challenge. He even cocked his machine gun, swung it around, and tauntingly glared at Zhang Heng. Just as Zhang Heng was about to react to that, Simone quickly stood up with her M28. She seemed akin to a lioness protecting her cub, which was Zhang Heng. Naturally, Zhang Heng was not pleased by her response. He muttered a few words and left with his snowboard. Zhang Heng felt that there was something terribly wrong about all this. The longer he stayed with Simone, the stronger this bad feeling got. Actually, it was not that hard to deal with a simple-minded brute like Weller. He was the same kind as Cheng Cheng, a man-child. Though Weller had a strong dislike towards Zhang Heng, he had not done anything overboard so far. At most, he would laugh at him with his friends when Zhang Heng passed him by. Sometimes he would even wear Zhang Heng's undercoat and deliberately walk in front of him. He had repeatedly done this, hopping to encourage a response. From time to time, he would glare at Zhang Heng with hatred, even spitting on the ground as a sign of disgust. With Zhang Heng looking away, he would often chuckle in satisfaction. After that, Zhang Heng got to know that Weller was married with 2 kids. His affection for Simone was more of admiration, an infatuation. He was green with jealousy when his crush hung out with Zhang Heng all the time. The best way to deal with these types was to do nothing at all about it. As time passed, he would have to accept that this was something that he could not change. The way Simone glared at him just now would definitely trigger his rebellious personality. Of course, Zhang Heng did not blame her for that. After all, nobody forced her, and she did it all out of good intentions. As long as she could remember, she had been staying with her great-grandfather, undoubtedly more straightforward than Weller. As for a woman like Maggie, Zhang Heng could never know what went through her mind. She had a natural flair for stage plays. Sometimes, she even acted so well that Zhang Heng could not help but believe whatever she said. She was a true femme fatale, and that was why Zhang Heng still did not trust her wholeheartedly. 40 minutes later, the guerrillas launched their third wave of attacks. This time, they employed different tactics, not striking at them directly. Instead, they had 2 snipers picking them off from afar. This allowed them to draw fire away from the rest of the guerrillas. While the Soviets were busy shooting at the sniper, the other guerrilla members would appear out of nowhere and strike the distracted soldiers. Simone had her priority on the heavy machine gunners. At the same time, Zhang Heng had also let off a couple of shots as well. These targets were a lot further away than the ones in his training sessions. He did not know if he had made any kills before suddenly. A notification. Successfully killed an enemy. Game points +5. For more information, please check your character panel. Was that a lucky shot, or did he really kill the one he aimed for? Chapter 74. The Mannerheim Line welcomes you XVI. After killing over 20 people and a commander, the Soviets had completely lost the will to fight. Some of them surrendered their weapons and begged for their lives, and some tried to run away. The guerrillas left a couple of fighters around to keep an eye on the deserters, while some others went into the forest to look for the runaways. Zhang Heng was not interested in these things that spilled blood. However, he knew that his first fight was the only time to prove his loyalty to the guerrilla force. The way he acted upon the Soviets today would determine how the Finnish would treat him tomorrow. So, Zhang Heng followed right behind them and shot those who were on the run. It looked like good target practice as well, trying to strike moving runners and all. A gunpowdery half an hour later, the fight was finally over. All in all, a total of 7 soldiers managed to escape. As for the rest of them, they were either captured or killed. This meant that an entire Soviet brigade had been eliminated. As for the guerrillas, there were a total of 2 dead. 1 suffered substantial injuries and 4 had flesh wounds, but nothing too serious. As for the fallen Finnish, 1 got shot directly in the head during the first wave of attack, and the second was killed while in pursuit of the enemy. Though the guerrillas eventually killed their killers in revenge, it was impossible to bring their dead allies back to life. After that, Weller led a few of his people to scout the battlefield and make an inventory of the spoils they had looted from the Soviets. A few of the guerrilla even looked excited, as if kids on a demented treasure hunt, looking ever excited at their new possessions. To the captured Soviets, each second that passed was hell, growing more anxious and panic-stricken. They had no idea what was going to happen to them. The Geneva Convention saw a way to treat prisoners of war with humanity. Unsurprisingly, the Soviets wanted no part of it in World War II. With that being said, Zhang Heng had never seen prisoners of war back at the base camp. It was simply not economically viable for guerrillas to keep them alive, not to mention not having the numbers to control a riot if a huge fight broke out. This time, they captured a total of 40 prisoners, and at least 4 to 5 guerrillas would be needed to escort them back to the base. Considering that they needed to deal with those that were injured, the possibility of crossing paths with other Soviets, and the possibility of the prisoners escaping, it still seemed unwise to bring them home. In an attempt to exert superiority, some of the guerrillas had brought over 2 Maxim heavy machine guns and pointed them at the prisoners, leaving them writhing and trembling. Some even wet their pants and started to cry in fear. All their weapons had been confiscated, and it seemed all but too late for these unfortunate souls. Zhang Heng had no intention to witness all the killing, not forgetting to leave the confiscated guns and valuable items as well. All he did was pick up ammunition. After filling his backpack, he left the place with Simone. As they were leaving, the loud rattle of heavy machine guns filled the air. Horrible screams of men doomed to their fate echoed painfully, leaving the forests engulfed in a veil of death and blood. It didn't last too long, though, as before long, silence embraced the dark woods once again. Before meeting Simone, Zhang Heng had experienced 2 fights. Hence, this was not his first time seeing bodies and parts scattered all around the floor. His calm reaction had left many befuddled. Throughout the entire battle, Zhang Heng did not drag anyone's feet and made no mistakes as well. This had caused many guerrillas to change the way they looked at him, their impressions greatly improving. They no longer treated him like he was invisible. A lot of them remembered that they, too, performed poorly in their early days of battle. Except for Weller and gang of best friends, the rest of the guerrilla members had gradually accepted Zhang Heng as one of their own. With only 2 casualties, the guerrillas had managed to decimate an entire brigade of Soviets. It was to be considered a stunning victory. At the same time, the spoils of battle this time was a lot better than expected. In total, they had raked in a dozen light machine guns, 2 heavy machine guns, significant numbers of rifles, and together with them the all too precious bullets. With all the new injection of weapons, Oher's problem was partially solved. Morale in the base camp ran high. Weller was locked in a noisy arm-wrestling battle with a few young men, no surprise there for the brutish Finn. There was a carnival atmosphere of sorts, with many drinking heartily and wagering bets on card games at the same time. When Zhang Heng entered the storeroom, he saw a new wooden bed, with a handsome pile of daily supplies beside it. "Aren't you going to join them?" Maggie suddenly materialized at the door like a specter. She leaned her curvy hips on the wooden door as she lit up a cigarette. She had just stitched up a 5-inch gash in the leg of a wounded guerrilla, leaving her collar with the cliché bloodstains of a war doctor. "No," answered Zhang Heng politely. "Do you think that they will all die on the battlefield soon?" she asked, looking at him with soulful but emotionless eyes. Zhang Heng did not know how to answer her. He knew he had to be cautious when she talked to the crafty Maggie. She could read him like an open children's book. "What is it that you're afraid of? Doesn't the entire Europe think the same bloody way? Even an idiot will know who the winner of this war will be, but that's all in the future anyway. Right now, enjoy each day as if it's your last." Zhang Heng did not say anything else after that, probably because he was the only one that knew that ending of this war. Having the knowledge of how a movie ended was like a spoiler, and this one didn't have the best of endings. He knew how this one ended. After all, a man out of time like him didn't share those deep-set goas, which defined the cause of the guerrillas. He just wanted to survive in this cruel environment. "Anyway, Ajay wants to tell you something. He said you did a good job. We treat our own well, and since you are part of us now, we will not allow you to suffer. Initially, we wanted to house you with the others, but it seems you prefer to be alone. This place is good enough, no need for any changes. For him, it was pointless staying with the others as he could not speak in Finnish. Silence would suit him better for now. Besides, as a rookie, he needed to wake up early to catch up with what the others knew. Shooting near a horde of sleeping Finns didn't sound like the brightest idea. Sighing, Maggie nodded her head, encouraged him, and left after that. Zhang Heng placed his snowboard at the corner of the wall before opening up his backpack. The loot of bullets fell to the ground as he unzipped the bag. In total, he had received 513 rounds from the fight, enough for many sessions of shooting practice. After witnessing Simon's incredible aiming, Zhang Heng was filled with a strong desire to improve himself. To a sniper, distance meant safety. Chapter 75. The Mannerheim Line welcomes you XVI. Zhang Heng lay on the snow-covered ground for half an hour. He was holding his M28 and had its stock resting on his shoulder. The weather today was so cold that his fingers were frozen. Though he managed to stay calm throughout most of the bad days here, he started to doubt if he could complete today's training. This was his 79th day in this world. The mission's dateline had passed, but the extra 24 hours he had each day graciously extended his mission to a total of 140 days. The good news was that the war was about to end soon. Basically, the winter war between the Soviet Union and Finland had two different phases. The first phase began on the 30th of November, 1939. The Soviets were divided into 4 teams and attacked Finland from all 4 directions. Undeniably, the attack ended badly for the Soviet Union, for after a long and hard battle, they only managed to conquer the northern tip of Finland. As for the other 3 directions, they suffered high losses. In the end, they were forced to retreat, returning to their homeland to conscript new soldiers. It was during that time that Finland had managed to devastate the great Soviet Union. This was notably evident at the battle at Karelian Isthmus, where the Soviets failed to break through the Mannerheim Line that Finland had maintained for a couple of decades. No matter how hard they tried, the Soviets were unable to figure out the foxy defense of Finnish. After paying the terrible price of thousands of lives, they only managed to penetrate 20 km into their defensive line. That January, things started to get a lot worse. The Red Army came up with the Northwestern Front, a Soviet military formation at Karelian Isthmus, assigning a marshal called Semyon Timoshenko as the commander. In total, there were field armies made up of the 21st Infantry Division and 6 tank brigades. The entire force was ordered to focus their fire on the Mannerheim Line. During that time, Finland's military was sorely lacking, having shortages of personnel, heavy weapons, and ammunition. Soon, these problems were exposed. Recently, the front line sent a large number of emergency reports to the guerrilla base camp. For now, they had nothing to do with Zhang Heng. He had been through around 20 battles throughout his time here. Every single day, he had to put his life on the line. The battles gradually got harder as compared to his first mission. There were a few times he almost got himself killed, even though trying his best to be extra cautious of his surroundings. The closest call he had was when a grenade landed right in front of him. One wouldn't doubt the luck a rabbit foot could grant, as in the end, the grenade did not explode, and Zhang Heng got to live to see another day. Many surprises and unforeseen circumstances occurred on a battlefield. Being extra careful did not guarantee that you got to keep your life. The tremendous stress that he was put under recently had driven him to improve his snowboarding and shooting skills faster than he could have before this. This was especially true for the latter. Within a month, Zhang Heng's shooting skill had climbed, and he was now at LV1. If he kept going at this rate, he might just be able to scrape LV2 next month. Right now, he had an 80% chance to land a critical shot at a target 200 meters away from him, and shooting distance was not his only improvement. All the while, Simone had been trying to help Zhang Heng improve the quality of his snipership on the whole, and a heightened war zone awareness that he had to have. Indeed, he was getting a lot better with each passing day, thanks to her dedication and perseverance. At the moment, Simone was attempting to sharpen Zhang Heng's observation skills. Earlier, she had deployed traps and managed to capture 5 weasels. After that, Simone made a mark on them before releasing them back to the wild. Zhang Heng was supposed to capture 3 out of 5 to complete the task. Sporting white fur, they were extremely difficult to spot on the snow-covered ground. To make things worse, the rodents were usually cautious of their surroundings. After searching for a continuous half an hour, Zhang Heng finally found one and put a bullet in it. There were still 4 to go, with Zhang Heng having a hunch that they had probably escaped by now. 10 minutes later, he spotted another weasel on a ridge. However, Zhang Heng was quite some distance away from his target, but he knew that if he waited any longer, he would surely lose the elusive animal. Immediately, he pulled the trigger. Unfortunately, the freezing cold had diminished his accuracy. Instead of hitting it, he simply scared it away. Zhang Heng shook his head and put away his rifle in frustration, feeling like giving up. He then saw Simone sitting beside the fire, deep in thought. For the entire week, the guerrillas were all on a sabbatical, having no war to fight. They had to wait until the Karelian Isthmus War ended before they resumed what they usually did. To be precise, Finland had to wait it out until other nations came to their rescue. England and France had promised that they would send their forces to help Finland defend against the Soviets. As for Switzerland and Norway, they had made it clear that they wouldn't be involved. Germany, too, mentioned that they had no intention to get involved in this war. Judging the current circumstances, they wouldn't be able to hold on until help arrived. At the same time, Finnish foreign affairs had been engaging with the Soviets. Unfortunately, Soviet demands were often unreasonable and outrageous, often making small ransoms for an even lower request. February soon arrived. The longer the war dragged, the worse the weather became. As Zhang Heng wasn't involved in the war, and as an outsider, he had no concern about the outcome. To Simone, however, her country was about to be conquered. He could feel how down she must have gotten, knowing that a foreign force was about to colonize the homeland she knew all her life. Things would never be the same again. Sadly, even if he became as good a sniper as Simone, there was no way Zhang Heng could change the results of the war. The only thing that he could do right now was to cheer her up, perhaps offer a shoulder or two. It was the best he could offer. Splat! A snowball suddenly landed on Simone's back. Immediately, she turned around to see what was going on. At the same time, the second snowball landed on her arm. Playfully, she rolled up her snowball in retaliation. A perfectly round snowball landed perfectly on Zhang Heng's chest. Such was the deadly accuracy of a masterful sniper. Zhang Heng then tossed 2 snowballs at Simone, who managed to dodge one with the other landing on her neck. She could not help but shiver as the snow fell under her clothes. This snowball fight had triggered the gods of rivalry within her. Snowballs flew everywhere with hints of laughter, bringing Simone a much-needed reprieve from the bitter horrors of human war. Everyone, no matter who won or lost, was a casualty. It wasn't before the night that the 2 of them returned to base camp. As Zhang Heng was about to boil some water to shower, he saw Maggie when he walked towards his cottage. "The 2 of you came back quite late today," she teased. "Is there something I can help you with?" Things are getting really bad at Karelian Isthmus. The Soviets managed to break through the first line of defense. Rumor is that the higher authorities are about to fulfill the demands of the Soviet Union. The war will be coming to an end soon. Ajay wants to talk to you about it. Are you available now? Chapter 76. The Mannerheim line welcomes you XVI. Zhang Heng put on his clothes and followed the doctor to where Ajay's residence. When he opened the door, Ajay was sitting on the table with a small knife while trimming the tip of a cigar. "Welcome, friend of Finland, freedom fighter, my yellow-skinned friend," he exclaimed with his arms open. Zhang Heng was invited to sit in front of Ajay. He had little contact with the guerrilla commander for the past 2 months. The last time he walked into this cottage was during his first arrival. He still remembered that the commander left after speaking a few sentences, and Maggie was the one who talked to him after that. Zhang Heng had no idea why the commander would want to talk to him now. Ajay put his cigar aside and produced a bottle of vodka under his table. It had been confiscated from one of the Soviet troops with only half a bottle left. Maggie then took out 3 glasses and filled them up. Actually, I want to thank you for what you have done for us. Thank you for everything that you have done for the past 2 months. During our darkest, most harrowing moments, you have graciously picked up arms and fought by our side. I want you to know that you have helped us protect our country. It's just too bad you're not Finnish, or our country would have decorated you with medals. Zhang Heng simply nodded as he bottomed up the cup of vodka, allowing the commander to finish. You should know that the war is coming to an end soon. What do you plan to do when the war is over? Zhang Heng calculated that he had about a month left before the war ended. Right until now, he had accumulated a total of 23 points. These were all the result of spotting a guerrilla base camp, killing an enemy, using a Molotov cocktail to destroy a tank, successfully killing a commander, and acquiring 10 bullet-shaped lighters. Indeed, some of these milestones were a bit on the weird side. Based on his primary mission, all he needed to do was to survive Finland for 20 days. Technically speaking, he wasn't required to stay here any longer. If possible, Zhang Heng wanted to travel to England or America. These 2 countries were considered some of the safest countries to be in during World War II. Although they did send throngs of troops to fight in other countries, their homelands were free from attacks. For Zhang Heng to be traveled to these 2 countries, the guerrilla commander had to first release him. Besides, the war was coming to an end. It was pointless keeping a foreigner here. Zhang Heng had been telling everyone how much he wanted to return to his hometown, but had never told anyone about his intentions of going to England or America. The commander and Maggie looked at each other, placing down their glasses at the same time. We pointed our guns at the same enemy. I'm going to be honest with you here. We will always believe in you no matter what happens since you are one of us. However, some of them do not think in the same way. What do you mean by that? You were spotted by the soldier that provides our ammunition. They are worried you might leak out information about us to others. For example, the way we deal with our war prisoners. You know, we do what we have to do. However, when such matters spread, I'm afraid it might affect us in a bad way. Considering that foreign affairs are negotiating with the Soviet Union, this is a very sensitive time. Such information must be top secret, by hook or by crook, answered Maggie while taking over the cigar handed by the commander. In a surprising turn of events, the commander then drew a pistol from his pocket and pointed at Zhang Heng. Immediately, the atmosphere in the room tensed. After a short while, the commander put down the gun on the table. Good news is we know what kind of person you are. For me, I know in my heart that you will not leak such intel to others. What we are about to do next is going to be very simple. We just need to figure out a way to change the minds of those who distrust you. What do you guys want me to do, huh? Assassinate Semyon Timoshenko. Zhang Heng's steady control of his emotions managed to impress Maggie and Ajay. Considering that a gun had just been pointed to him point-blank, they expected him to have an outburst by now. He had contributed a lot to the guerrilla base camp with Simone, undeniably presenting impeccable performance through the trenches of war. Right now, the commander had just turned on him, and Zhang Heng could still control his anger. His character was truly impressive. In actual fact, Zhang Heng wasn't as calm as he looked. He just realized that he had made a huge mistake. It was not as simple as a video game. The moment he chose to become part of the guerrilla force, he knew that no one would fully trust him, mainly because of his ethnicity and their inability to check his background. The guerrilla team had simply made use of him to deal with the Soviets. However, during that critical period, he was forced to join a side to survive the war. Technically speaking, both sides were taking advantage of each other. As the circumstances changed, the relationship between him and the guerrilla troops changed as well. At first, he was needed by the base camp to defeat their enemies. Now, they had turned around and made him a threat. Deep inside his heart, he knew that they would not let him off the hook so easily, even though helped in eliminating tons of enemies, also spending some good, quality time with them. It seemed like everything had reached a moot point. Don't worry, we are all reasonable folks. We will not send you to do a suicide mission. What I want you to do is fairly simple. Once you complete it, all debt between us will be no more. When that time comes, you are free to go wherever you want, said Ajay. Maggie blew out a smoke circle. Her eyes gave out a certain hesitation in her. After some time, Maggie barged in. Did you know that the girl wasn't originally called Simone? Zhang Heng frowned, having no idea why she would bring out Simone all of a sudden. The country is not in a critical state, but we will need a hero to unite everyone. We can wait for the hero to appear, or we can create on. Maggie's expression was slightly weird. She looked like she was taunting him, but with respect. The real Simon came from a small town called Rotjarvi. No one cared about that place, and no one cares what he did there as well. All we know is that he's just a farmer, and he would hunt occasionally. He is the most ordinary bloke that you will ever meet. That means you can alter his past to your liking. Chapter 77. The Mannerheim line welcomes you XIX. I don't understand the idea behind it. There's one Simone right here. Why do we need to create another one? With her shooting skills, she is more than qualified enough to become a national hero. Why do you want to turn some random hunter into a national hero? Not one, replied the doctor, cigar in mouth. What? There is more than one Simone. In total, we have 4 Simons. All are professional fighters. 3 of them are snipers, and another one is a natural on the submachine gun. All 4 have their faces covered when they go on a mission, so their identities are secure. Together, they become the best sniper the entire human history has known, the legendary Simone. Basically, Simone is everywhere. He is a phantom on the battlefield, your most reliable ally, the White Death to the Soviet soldiers, and an undefeatable legend on the battlefield. The Simons have managed to boost morale for all Finnish countrymen and our soldiers greatly. To be more precise, there are only 3 Simons left. One was tragically killed when the Soviets started the war. We don't even have much information on him. How about the real Simone? Does he know about this? Zhang Heng asked, hopping for a straight answer for once. That is not important. The real Simone joined the army last October, and during training, he protected one of his allies from an exploding grenade. If that incident did not happen, this project would not have even been born. But then again, the war is coming to an end soon, and there are 2 Simons left in this world, said Maggie while spinning the lighter in her hand impatiently. The person that started this project did not expect this outcome, right? Yes, initially a fair chance was to be given to all Simons that survived the war. At least, they could use the gun in their hands to decide their final fate. Unfortunately, an unforeseen circumstance has emerged. What kind of unforeseen circumstances? The 2 Simons that survived was the female sniper and the man with the submachine gun. The latter one was hit by a stray bullet during one of the raids a few days ago. Miraculously, he survived after surgery. Then, someone must have leaked the news to the media. Reporters from different countries rushed to him, and it was during that time that he revealed his identity. Actually, I can understand why he would do something like this. That kid with the submachine gun is the strongest Simone when compared to the other 3. Considering he is now severely injured, there is no way can defeat the sniper in a gunfight. What now? Are you guys planning to abandon her? Asked Zhang Heng as he stared into their eyes. We don't have many options left. We have to play his game, and we need to make up stories for him as well. Zhang Heng was unable to speak. He stared right into Maggie's eyes for half a minute, not knowing what they were thinking. If you want me to believe you, you have to tell me how an English volunteer has her hands in so many top secrets, he continued. I lied. The truth is, I did grow up in England, but my father is from Finland, and he is a powerful man in the Finnish military. I'm the one who proposed the Simone plan and personally recruited all the Simons. I simply want my father to witness the birth of a legend. That is why I'm here right now. Ajay was sent by the military to protect me. Maggie looked very troubled. She stood in front of the window with both arms crossed in the exact same way when she and Zhang Heng first met. Suddenly, it dawned on him, as he knew what was troubling her. She realized that it was almost impossible for her to treat all 4 Simons fairly, since she spent most of her time with the current Simone living in this base camp. Due to that, she could not maintain objectivity when it came to picking out the best of the lot. After all, we are all humans, and I care about the girl a lot. Before this, I had a thought amid the war, to get an assassin to kill the rest of Simons and let her live. I had no idea if she was tough enough to survive the war. With my position, I simply couldn't risk killing all the other Simons. So, the moment I heard that the second Simon was dead, I knew that the chances she would live after the war had just increased exponentially. What's happening right now came totally unexpected. So, now you found out that you can't beat her and you want me to take care of your problem. Why don't you just let her go? You know her well enough. She doesn't mind not being a national hero whatsoever, snapped Zhang Heng while staring at the gun on the table. I'm the one who proposed the project, not the one in charge of executing it. I have some rights in this project, but not all of it. My job is technically over once all 4 Simons have been recruited. Whatever I did after that is all my own doing. The military and higher authorities have nothing to do with them. I can't change what had happened, and I can't change the mind of the top brass as well. That kid Simone trusts you fully, and that is why I'm telling you all this stuff. Asking you to send her to the end of the road is the kindest thing I can do. I heard that there is a beautiful lake northwest of here. Perhaps we can fish there when everything is over. Finally, Maggie was done with everything she wanted to say. I don't get a choice either, right? Looking down and without hesitation, Zhang Heng grabbed the gun on the table. Maggie had her back facing him and did not say a single word. Zhang Heng left the wooden house as well since he had asked all that he wanted. He then walked towards Simone's cottage. For all it was worth, he made sure to thank Maggie before he left. The guerrilla base camp was extra quiet tonight. Usually, Oher would lean at the door and gaze to the sky, looking for shooting stars. Not tonight, though. The entire base camp was flooded with light, with a kerosene lamp illuminating the doors of each cottage of the base camp. Zhang Heng did not turn around to look at the jungle. He put the gun into his pocket and used another hand to knock on the door. Since Maggie did not like to bring her key around, Simone was unsurprised when someone knocked on her door at this hour. However, she was startled when she saw Zhang Heng standing outside the door. The moment he caught sight of her, he grabbed her collar and pushed her to the ground. Surprisingly, Simone did not retaliate. All she did was lie on the floor and stare at Zhang Heng. Her face was flushing. Just like what Maggie told him, Simone trusted Zhang Heng with all her heart, no matter the situation. Zhang Heng sighed. All he needed to right now was to take out the gun from his pocket and end it all. Looking into her eyes, he saw that they were heartbroken, confused, but submissive. He hesitated. In the end, he couldn't make himself do it. Instead, he tried his best to look through the Finnish dictionary in his mind, saying, "Trust me." After that, Zhang Heng started to look around to check out the room. With Maggie's wittiness, Zhang Heng was confident that she had made preparations well before she signaled him earlier. He then looked at Maggie's bed. That and the cabinet were the only places where Maggie could hide her stuff. Chapter 78. The Mannerheim line welcomes you XX. Gunshots blasting at the wooden house broke the silence of the night. After a short while, a strange rustling sound came from the forest where few masked men with submachine guns charged at where Zhang Heng and Simone were. Their wore plain winter camouflage with no insignia bearing their unit or identity. Little did they know that Zhang Heng was about to welcome them with a Maxim heavy machine gun. Good thing Maggie was crazier than he expected, a trait that proved useful in time like this. With a bit of patience, Zhang Heng waited until all the unknown assailants were close to the cottage before opening fire at full force. Shells flew out from the chamber, in a continuous stream, like an angry fire-spitting dragon. Clearly, those 5 men had prepared to deal with surprises like this. However, they had not accounted for Zhang Heng to use a Maxim heavy machine gun to go against them. The gun's destructive firepower had crushed any possibility of retaliation. Before they could do anything, their bodies were shredded into pieces, their flesh exploding into tiny bits as the bullets ravaged through without mercy. Though the gun was potent, it consumed ammo at an obscene speed as well. In that short skirmish, Zhang Heng had consumed all the ammunition prepared by Maggie. Due to the gun's weight, it was not possible for him to carry it around. After killing the first wave of enemies, he abandoned the cumbersome machine and took out his handgun to shoot the kerosene lamp that was still alit. The moment the flames went out, the second wave of enemies arrived. In senseless insanity, thousands of bullets started spraying out of the forest toward the base camp. It was so powerful it shredded the thin wooden walls of the cottage. Luckily, Simone had pushed over the bed, serving as a barrier. Still, she could not figure out why enemies would appear in the base camp all of a sudden. Knowing that the two of them were in a life-threatening situation, she quickly picked up Zhang Heng's M28 and loaded the weapon. After 3 minutes of continuous shooting, the firing came to a stop. Bullets had wholly decimated the wooden house. Plates and bowls on the table had been shattered into pieces. They were only alive thanks to the bed. Otherwise, they would have been instantly killed by the merciless rain of fire. Zhang Heng could see that these masked men were determined to eliminate Simone. They had come well prepared. 3 people attempted to approach the cottage from the forest, but were greeted in kind by 3 bullets. Simone had managed to kill them. Zhang Heng did fire twice as well. Unfortunately, he was not used to using a handgun and missed. Then the shooting started up again. Gunshots rang out from all directions, and shells began to flood the house like there was no tomorrow. Judging by the intensity of the ambush, they should be about 20 or 30 people shooting at the same time. Sooner or later, the bed would surely give in to the onslaught. Unfortunately, there was nothing they could do right now. It seemed practically impossible to bring Simone out of the snare they were cornered into. In a crude manner of speech, Zhang Heng had indeed been fooled by Maggie. Out of kindness, Maggie wasn't completely honest about Simone with him. Surrounded by continuous fire, Maggie knew that it was improbable they would survive. She believed that with Zhang Heng's cunning, he would surely figure out the consequences of knowing top secrets. Even if he chose to kill Simone, there was no way that she would let him leave the base camp alive. Zhang Heng had said earlier that he had no options when it came to this. It turned out he was right. Still, Zhang Heng was grateful for Maggie because he knew that it would be hard for him to stay away and out of it. He knew that he would never leave Simone and ran away alone. Besides, he still had his trump card with him. The wooden sculpture was lying there quietly inside his pocket. He could transform himself into a shadow and flee the demolished cottage in an instant. However, the night was moonless, meaning he was limited to only moving where the kerosene lamps were. This was a big problem, and it was going to be really difficult for him to enter the forest behind the line of heavily armed soldiers. Unfortunately, he knew he had to do it if the situation got any worse. Just when Zhang Heng wanted to reach into his pocket to grab the wooden sculpture, he heard there were more gunshots. This time, however, the gunshots did not come from the forest but from the base camp. Zhang Heng saw a single Weller shooting at the forest with his light machine gun. At the same time, the limping Oher kicked down a table, placed his rifle on top of it, and started to shoot at the forest like a madman. All hell had broken loose, and the other guerrillas quickly followed suit as well. Of course, Zhang Heng would not let this golden opportunity slip away from him. Immediately, he kicked down the tattered wall behind him and dragged Simone out of the wooden house. Suddenly, he heard someone whistling as they were running. From afar, a guerrilla tossed a submachine gun to him and signaled him to join the battle. From the beginning of the war until now, the guerrillas had decreased from over 40 members to only about a dozen left. More than half had been killed in action. This reduction in number made them more united than before, and although they were ordered not to leave their rooms tonight, all of them chose to go against the order when they saw Simone's cottage being shot at. Such unexpected results surprised those on both sides of the divide. The truth was, enemies greatly outnumbered them. However, the guerrillas' strong teamwork had managed to hold back the enemies. But soon, the enemies started to reorganize and started another retaliation. Until now, the enemies had been hiding out in the forest, giving the guerrillas the upper hand during the first wave of attack. On the second wave of attack, the enemies started to work together, and the guerrillas were beginning to sustain injuries during the shootout. Simone wanted to head back to help her friends, but Zhang Heng knew that they were targeting her. The longer she stayed there, the more dangerous it was going to be for the others. Zhang Heng tapped on her shoulder. Gunshots were everywhere around the base camp, and amid the confusion, nobody knew where to head to. However, this was not a problem for Zhang Heng. Maggie had actually signaled Zhang Heng secretly when they were talking in the commander's cottage. Northwest was where they should head to if they wanted to live to see tomorrow. Chapter 79. The Mannerheim Line welcomes you XXI. Zhang Heng and Simon worked together, swiftly blowing out all the kerosene lamps that were hanging around the base. With that, the entire camp was now pitch black. It was as dark as a cave, with only the stars to light the way. All they could see was a silhouette from far. Zhang Heng and Simon were about 70 meters away from the forest that was located northwest of them. However, they were only 40 meters away from the west, and there was a storeroom along their path. That made Zhang Heng was keener to first head west before running northwest to enter the forest. The only thing that he needed to do right now was to eliminate the gunner that was hiding west. Rifle in hand, Zhang Heng tossed away the handgun that he was holding earlier. Then, they both lay on the snow-covered ground on their left and right. Just as expected, the enemy that had remained hidden for some time could not bear the boredom anymore. He drew out his gun and started shooting at Weller. The moment he fired, he fatally exposed his current position. Instantly, Zhang Heng and Simon took the opportunity to land a critical shot on him. Along with the loud gunshots, one of the enemies fell to the ground lifelessly. Simon did not stop there, using her excellent photographic memory and sharp observation skills to fire at another. Unfortunately, Weller got shot. It seemed like the enemies in the forest had no intention to kill, only shooting him in the leg. Zhang Heng knew that he could not afford to wait any longer. Immediately, he dragged Simon into the storeroom. One of the enemies noticed them and quickly sprayed some bullets their way in an attempt to block them off. At that very moment, Simon signaled to Zhang Heng that she would draw away the enemies to let Zhang Heng flee from the trapped position. Without thinking twice, Zhang Heng shook his head, rejecting her proposal. He knew that all those people were actually here to kill Simon, and there was no way he was about to leave her here to the wolves and vultures. Rather than being sitting ducks, Zhang Heng decided to return fire. That was the last resort anyway. The chance of them winning seemed slim. Even if they could both eliminate all the enemies, most guerrillas would die in vain. Seeing that the two of them were trapped, Weller mustered up his strength and courage and stood up, battling the pain in his shot leg. He did not retreat to a safe spot but instead pulled one of the corpses on the ground and used the body to shield him from the incoming bullets. With one hand, he picked up the submachine gun and started to shoot at the enemies. Having the covering fire, Zhang Heng and Simon ran into the forest as fast as their legs could carry them. The enemies gave chase, opening fire at the same time. Those 3 seconds that they experienced were like 3 centuries to them, as they gouged out every last bit of strength and ran without looking back. Right before they entered the forest, something unexpected happened. They remembered there were only 3 people shooting at them from the west side of the forest. Nobody would have expected that the 4th enemy awaited them in the woods. A lot of it happened out there, and his mates had all scattered, but he was determined to stay hidden to wait for Zhang Heng's and Simon's arrival. At such proximity, it was almost impossible for the enemy to miss his shot. The man in the mask lifted the submachine gun in his hand. Not to be outdone, Simone had her rifle held in her hands as well. She had no time to aim, adjust her breath, or stabilize her shooting position. All she could do was run and shoot at the same time. The shot was fired. Seconds later, the masked man's pupils contracted. He froze, then collapsed to the ground with a sickening thud. Simone had managed to kill him without aiming. Unfortunately, there was no time to catch a breath. Soon after that, more people started coming after them. Zhang Heng swiftly picked up the submachine gun and a few boxes of ammunition before he started to run again. If Maggie was telling the truth, then Northwest should be the most vulnerable spot for the enemies. That did not mean that once they were there, they would be completely safe. There could be an ambush lurking for them in the dark. After what they experienced earlier, they were much more cautious this time. It was easy for one to hide in the forest, but at the same time, it was also easy to be ambushed. Until now, Simone had no idea what was going on. She was left stunned when she saw that the man who ambushed them was actually one of the guerrillas. Suddenly, Zhang Heng felt that it wasn't too bad a thing they had this language barrier. He was unable to tell Simone that her own country had betrayed her even if he wanted to do so. The two of them did not stay at the same place for too long, and after collecting some weapons and picked most of the ammunition, they continued to run towards the forest. While they were running, they encountered a few enemies. Fortunately, these were either alone or walked in pairs. Simone had superior hearing ability and vision when compared to most of her counterparts. In most cases, she was able to spot enemies first before they spotted her. That was why most of her battles ended really fast. The deeper they went, the fewer enemies they encountered. It turned out Magi wasn't lying to them. Soon, they would be able to break through the defense line. As they walked on, they suddenly heard someone shouting in the forest. Zhang Heng couldn't understand what they were talking about but sensed that Simone's emotions had drastically changed. She just stood there frozen and had stopped moving. Zhang Heng guessed that they were pulling some dirty tricks to draw her out. They must be telling her that their target was actually Zhang Heng and wanted her to help them to capture him. This situation was the double cross of crosses. Her country had already betrayed her, but here, they were still lying to her, taking advantage of her loyalty. If he could ever speak in Finnish, Zhang Heng would definitely tell her the whole truth. It seemed that the enemies knew that he could not converse in Finnish. All right, Zhang Heng did know how to speak in Finnish if only a couple of words. He could try to squeeze out something to explain himself. However, knowing that his broken Finnish was going to make him seem more suspicious, he decided to stay mum. He had said everything that he needed to say back at the cottage. Right now, it was all up to Simone. The longer they stayed here, the more dangerous the situation was going to be. Still, Zhang Heng did not rush her. Both of them just stood in the dark until someone approached them. Simone lifted up her head and looked at Zhang Heng, looking as serene as usual. Right now, Zhang Heng was at a massive disadvantage. If Simone started to fall for their lies, he would have to drag her away by force. To his surprise, she lifted up her rifle and pulled the trigger. A man standing beside the tree was hit. Simone had just used actions to say what she had to say. Rather than trusting the words of some strangers, she chose to put her faith in those who had genuinely spent time with her. Sometimes, women trusted their hunches more than theories, and this soon proved to be true. Chapter 80. The Mannerheim line welcomes you XXII. The sound of gunshots and shouting faded into the distance. 2 hours later, it was all but complete silence. Zhang Heng deduced that they must have successfully broken through the enemy's defensive lines. Both of them had now reached the lake that Magi mentioned earlier, finding a boat tied to its banks. With that tiny rowboat, they would be able to shake off all the enemies that were chasing them, no longer having to worry about their scent being tracked down by hounds. Just as Zhang Heng was about to get on the boat, Simone collapsed suddenly. A muzzle flash came from the darkness followed by a speeding bullet whizzing by. The round lodged itself in her shoulder and was embedded deep in her flesh. There was an active shooter nearby. Simone didn't wait and reacted with lightning-fast reflexes. After going through several battles with Zhang Heng, both of them knew what to do by now. Instinctively, she rolled over to the side, quickly looking for a nearby tree nearby and took cover behind it. The second shot whizzed by Zhang Heng's ear. This time, it was so close it left him paralyzed in shock. Without a doubt, they had encountered a pro this time. The earlier battles might have looked dangerous as the enemies had the upper hand since they outnumbered them. However, both of them had the advantage when it came to fighting with a small group. It seemed like these new enemies had pretty good teamwork and strict discipline. They were, however, vulnerable when they were alone. It was safe to say that, although they were as skillful as the guerrillas, they could never be as good as Simone. However, the sniper that they just encountered was on a different level altogether. Judging by the accuracy of his shots, he must at least be as good as Simone. This guy would prove a painful headache to deal with. With such skills, he could easily be the poster boy of every task force that he joined. If this were to be a normal situation, of course, they would have figured out a solution. Unfortunately, the enemy managed to land a shot on the shoulder that she used to hold her gun. Though she trained to shoot with her left hand, its speed and accuracy could never compare to her right. Frankly, this seemed the moment the Grim Reaper had finally arrived. They could seriously lose their lives at any moment now. Zhang Heng realized that they were in a life-threatening situation. The visibility in the forest was so poor that he could not use his ace in the whole shadow moment. The enemy might even call for backup if they continued to linger. To their greatest surprise, the enemy who hid in the dark did not do so. After the 2 gunshots, silence once again embraced the forest. It was as if nothing happened. The wind passed them by, and the wooden boat still bobbed gently on the lakeside. Zhang Heng then saw blood dripping from her fingertips. Simone frowned but did not say a single word about it. She was unable to feel it, her arm becoming paralyzed in some way by the gunshot wound. Zhang Heng drew in a deep breath and used his hand to signal Simone to relax. Usually, she would be the one protecting him in a situation like this. This time, Zhang Heng knew he needed to be the one that protected Simone. He then took out the wooden sculpture from his pocket and extended his arm with it. Seconds later, the sniper fired squarely at it without doubts. Zhang Heng held on to it as tightly he could to avoid it from flying out of his hand. After that, he studied the wooden sculpture. By judging how deep the bullet had penetrated the wooden statue, Zhang Heng could calculate how far the sniper was. If Simone was not wounded, she could have surely returned fire. However, even without her assistance, Zhang Heng could still estimate where the sniper was. It would prove impossible for him to defeat the sniper if he charged out right now. The sniper's shooting skills clearly bettered Zhang Heng's. The only way for him to win this fight was to pinpoint the sniper's exact location. So Zhang Heng took out the bullet-shaped lighter that he acquired earlier and used the same way to check out the sniper's position. He struck the flint, and just as expected, the sniper landed a shot on the lighter. This time, the lighter was sent flying away from Zhang Heng's hand. Calmly, he took out the 3rd item. This time, the sniper was smart enough to know Zhang Heng's intention. No matter what Zhang Heng did, he stopped firing at the item that he saw. 2 minutes later, Zhang Heng took out his cell phone. Ever since he joined the guerrillas, he had stopped using it. Initially, its battery was at 50%. After putting it to sleep for 2 months, it was now left with a lethargic 10%. It was just enough to help him to gain the upper hand. No one in this era had seen a cell phone before. The 2 items that Zhang Heng sent out were just decoys. As the 3rd item that he sent out was his cell, he used it to record his surroundings for 2 minutes. Lastly, he turned on his flash function to illuminate his place a total of 4 times. And that was how Zhang Heng located where the sniper was. The sniper was well prepared, wearing a ghillie suit of sorts. Not only was he equipped with camouflage, but he enhanced it with snow, mud, and branches. He was now one with his surroundings, almost invisible if one did not look hard enough. Unfortunately, he could not escape the sharpness of a modern 12-megapixel camera. The real danger had only begun. Zhang Heng's advantage was that he came in a pair. Therefore, it was impossible for the sniper to know who was going to attack first. In other words, he had to split his attention between 2 different persons, continually shifting from side to side. When Zhang Heng enlarged the photo that he took, he saw that the sniper expression, an excited, gleeful sneer across his face. He was beaming with some sort of glorious purpose in his eyes. Was he relishing the joys of hunting? Zhang Heng finally understood why the sniper didn't call for his allies. This was his hunting grounds and would never allow anyone to encroach his territory. Zhang Heng knew that ultimately, he wasn't the target. His target was the girl known as the White Death, Simone. It seemed like the reason why he fired the shot earlier was to eliminate Zhang Heng. With that, he would be able to have a head-to-head face-off with Simone. Zhang Heng signaled Simone to relax her injured shoulder and hold the rifle in her other hand. Though he could not see what was going on, he could guess that the sniper must be really nervous right now. The final showdown was nigh. Seconds later, a black shadow charged from the back of a tree. The sniper cowering behind the trees had an adrenaline rush the moment he saw something flashing in front of him. Prey? No, it couldn't be. It was a trap. The astute sniper took a swift 0.01 seconds to deduce that the black shadow was simply a jacket. Though he had his rifle aimed at it, he managed to stop himself from pulling the trigger. At the same time, he got even more excited. Simone must have been ready to return fire since she pulled a trick like this. Seconds later, his heart skipped a beat. That was because it was Simone that had appeared from the tree, but instead, Zhang Heng was the one who had emerged from another direction. It was at that moment that the sniper realized he had made a fatal mistake. He expected that Simone would come out to take the shot. The jacket and Zhang Heng were just illusions and distractions. Hence, he did not shift his aim. Besides, he was initially confident enough that they were unable to pinpoint the exact spot he was hiding in such a short amount of time. That was why he hesitated. At the same time, Zhang Heng lifted up his rifle as fast as possible. Utilizing the shortest amount of time, he took aim and fixed his posture for the shot. Zhang Heng now knew exactly where he was hiding. He knelt on the ground and prepared to pull his trigger at the sniper. However, the enemy soon realized that someone was aiming at him from another direction and immediately changed his aim. Zhang Heng heard something, but in his deep concentration, he couldn't identify the sound. Both of them then pulled the trigger at the same time. One bullet grazed someone's face, the other had penetrated someone's skull.